Hello everyone, welcome to my review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 6. Yeah, buckle up, get comfortable, get relaxed, get a bowl of popcorn, get a big ass drink. We're going to be here for quite some time. Yeah, this has easily been the hardest review I've had to prepare for in terms of like making notes and formulating opinions, trying to decide where I sit on certain subjects and stuff like that. And I actually think that's to Season 6's credit, because it really kind of gets you thinking, and a lot of conflicting emotions kind of come about by, you know, certain events that happen and certain character decisions, certain plot elements, certain just like singular episodes, even like more standalone ones or like plot heavy ones. It's a very divisive season for sure, as I've gotten the impression of even back when I was kind of about to start it. I think I started this season in February, something like that, January or February. And yeah, it was quite the ride and quite the experience. And yeah, it's a very kind of complicated thing, but I'm going to try my best to kind of cohesively talk about it. I think it's difficult. It was a lot trying to kind of get all this together, and I've had a lot of time since I finished the season, but still it's like, ooh, so I can only imagine the clarity I may feel in like a year or two's time, or even 20 years time. Like some people who watched it live, you know, I imagine even to some extent some of those people are conflicted, because, you know, as time passes and things progress, attitudes, stuff change in the world. Some things age better than others, and that's kind of another thing to consider when you're watching these older shows. And I think in many aspects Season 6 is very, very ahead of its time, or just sadly, you know, not necessarily ahead of its time, but just still sadly very relevant to today's society in some cases. But yeah, this is gonna be the review. Might be quite a long one, so buckle up. And I'm determined to kind of film it all in one kind of session. I took a lot of breaks with the Angel review, because I just found it very difficult to get into like the feeling to do reviews this time around. I don't know why. Well, I know why for Buffy, because I had quite the experience with this season in terms of like comments and spoilers and stuff, which will have affected, I think, my view of the season as a whole. That's for sure. That is one thing to consider. I did get a few things kind of spoiled for me. I knew something bad was going to happen to Tara, based on like a lot of comments like, watch the main titles, blah 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 blah, for Seeing Red, and I knew Willow was going to turn evil. So that was just before the episode I actually got to those episodes. So it's not like I knew the whole season in advance. It was not too affected in that sense, but certainly that last little arc, I'd say, was a bit influenced. And midway through the season, I had a bit of a thing where I needed to take a bit of a break and step back from not just Buffy, but for reacting for a bit. 'Cause quarantine, baby, you get a bit burnt out. I certainly was overdoing it, I think. And some comments, I think, got to me a bit. Some of the hate got to me a bit this season. And yeah, in terms of that, I think that's definitely kind of clouded my opinion of the season a bit. Maybe once that kind of anger and frustration that those comments kind of caused me, and some of the upset that they caused me kind of passes, you'll have to reflect on that. But that's something we can do way back when. But honestly, I don't see my opinions changing that much, you know. I think everything I've said in all my previous reviews of Buffy and Angel are probably still my opinions now. But that's fine, because that's kind of what your opinions can be, you know, and they don't always change. But I think that certainly did cause a bit of a hindrance to reaching the full potential of enjoyment for the season. Just some of the experience I had with like spoilers and commenters and stuff. But you know, that's a small minority, and hopefully that won't be happening with Season 7, you know, because I'm only going to do one more Buffy review, then that's that. I will obviously carry on and do the comics and stuff, but I don't see myself doing like proper reviews for them at the end of like the seasons or whatever. So yeah, I was like making notes and stuff, and I wrote down my predictions for Season 7, and I was like, oh my god, I'm never gonna write down predictions for a season of Buffy ever again. This is kind of the last one, so that's kind of crazy. But yeah, as always with these reviews, it's going to be split into 6 sections. First one, just going to talk about my general thoughts, observations, discussion about the season. Then we're going to revisit the predictions I made in my Season 5 review for this season, see how I did. Then we're going to talk about the characters in this season that I think are worthy of talking about and discussing and stuff like that. Then we're going to talk about the themes I picked up on in the season. Then we're going to look at favourite episodes voted for by you guys, then my top 5 episodes, and then finally my predictions for Season 7. So that's how it's going to work. And yeah, we might as well get started. And if I keep looking down, obviously I have my notes here, and there are many, many pages, so we'll get through it. But yes, we're going to start, of course, with general thoughts, observations, and discussion of this season. And obviously bear in mind things I've already mentioned so far, and the fact that these are my opinions. They are not facts by any means, because I know we're going to get to some decisions and like views where I'm clearly in the minority, but that's fine. And yeah, what I have to say about like some characters, some plot lines, some themes that I pick out, it may not have been everything I've ever thought of, and not every single example I can think of, but it would save some time, and I feel like we're already going to be here for long enough, so I won't take up as much of your time as I possibly could have done by discussing every single little thing and why I think it, blah 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 blah. So yeah, just something to bear in mind, of course. This is just my opinion at the end of the day. So yes, Season 6. Overall, I would say this is a very, very solid season. It's a lot of people's least favourite, and I saw a few people saying they really didn't enjoy this season and there's only a couple of episodes they like, which I can completely understand. I can see why you wouldn't like this season. I think it did feel very different, and a lot of that may have been down to moving from the previous channel, the WB, to UPN. It may have just been like the darker tone of like the overall stories, and a lot of the character choices and stuff that happened. I think that could easily, you know, some of those storylines could be very triggering to some people, so that's going to cause a disconnect because they just can't kind of cope and deal with that. Some very emotional, hard-hitting stories. That could just make it not at all enjoyable for you to watch. But for me personally, I wouldn't say that this is like my least favourite season. I definitely prefer it to Season 1. Probably I prefer it to Season 4 as well. I may even prefer it to Season 2. Although I really like Season 2. I have quite a soft spot for Season 2 because I love the back half of it. May prefer it to Season 3 even, and I think that's quite unpopular because Season 3 is great. But I don't know, whenever I look back on it and think on it, I'm never like, whoa, like that had like my absolute favourite episode in it or whatever. And yeah, I guess this would rank somewhere in the middle if I was going to rank them, but I don't really enjoy doing that because my opinion probably changed on that all the time doing rankings. Like Season 2 and 3, I always swap them around when I think of the ranking. But Season 5 still remains my favourite season, but Season 6 is by no means my least favourite. It's probably around the middle-ish. And yeah, very solid season. I thought it was constantly engaging. There may have been highs and lows in episodes. I loved episodes I was like, yeah, that's okay. But I thought it was constantly entertaining me. I thought it was very thought-provoking, for better or worse, obviously for some people. There's a lot to kind of ponder and think about, and it just gets very deep and very dark, depressing at times. So while it is kind of engaging, I think it can be very tough to stomach. It may have been easier for me to watch like week by week, just like do one a week as like it aired or whatever. But the fact that more often than not, I was watching like at least 2 episodes of Buffy a week and kind of going through the season fairly quickly. That's maybe what made it feel like, oh god, this is a lot, you know. Which is why I was actually very, very grateful to my watch order being the way it is, because going back and forth between this and Angel definitely helped, I think, to appreciate the season a bit more and just be like, oh my god, this is just so depressing, I don't even want to get emotionally invested because it's just going to sadden me. And I think in that sense, that's a big thing with Season 6 I'm not as big on. I think it went a bit too far with some of the down, depressing stuff. Because I get life is shit, life sucks. I know, believe me. And they're certainly going for that. And life is the big bad, really, Liam. Yes, it is. You're right, I know. And I think in terms of like trying to get the themes and topics across that they were going for this season, I think they threw too much into it, almost. There's a bit too much kind of like, okay, everyone must be sad. Because I get that life is hard, life is tough, going through the motions, blah, blah, blah. I completely understand that. But I think the fact that every single character was basically really sad every single episode, like all the time, not even like one person had like a happy storyline or anything, I think that was a bit too much, and I think that I can certainly see that being like a black hole of enjoyment. It just sucks your enjoyment away, and that didn't quite feel as realistic to me. And it certainly didn't sit right to me that the so-called, like some so-called villains this season, like the trio, seems to be having like the more fun. And again, that's why I'm very conflicted about season 6, I would say, is because I get what they were going for. I understand everything that they were trying to accomplish, and I think they did accomplish it, for sure. But I didn't necessarily like that, and I think they just went a bit too hard on it. And I don't think the subtlety about like some of the themes and stuff was there in a way that previous seasons did have it. And of course there were more like light-hearted fun episodes, but I just think maybe it was trying a bit too hard to get what it was going for, you know, and get that across for me. And yeah, while I understand what they were going for with so many elements this season, I was like, yeah, I get that, I get what they're going for, I appreciate it. We'll certainly be talking about this a bit later on with the trio. Doesn't mean I have to like it, and me not liking it doesn't mean I don't understand. I got some comments, mainly regarding my thoughts on the trio, which obviously we'll talk about later, saying, oh, well, you don't like them because you clearly just don't get it. You clearly don't understand what they're going for. I do. I really do. But appreciating and understanding what something's going for, what it's trying to do, and not liking it are two very different things. I don't think you can just be like, oh yeah, I get what they're going for, therefore I like it and it's good. I accept what season 6 did. It was done very well for the most part and was very good, but I don't have to like it. And some people didn't seem to get that with me. They just thought I didn't understand it because I didn't like it. That's not true at all. They're two completely separate things. So I kind of wanted to get that out of the way as well, because that's very much going to be applied to my thoughts on the trio, which we probably all know by now if you see my reactions to season 6. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind. I understand. And maybe it's frustrating that I don't like some aspects of it, but what can you do? Gotta be honest. So yeah, the cast were definitely tested and strained this season, I would say, in terms of like the material of their characters, because their characters were put through the ringer as well for the most part. They kind of had a lot to kind of cope with and deal with and go through, and got some really dark places, their characters, and therefore the actors had to kind of get to those dark places as well and kind of endure all this sadness and pain for, like, God knows, like 8-9 month shoot of the year, I imagine they had to just spend being sad as their characters, which can't be easy. But I think that gives me all the more respect for them still all giving it their all and giving some fantastic performances, because as always the cast were just so great. And seeing the characters go to such bad and dark places and make these bad decisions and stuff, I think that's a real test of their acting abilities, and I think they all absolutely nailed it this season. And again, seeing it with like two sides, the fact that the cast was so good and so heartbreaking in some of their performances, like Willow breaking down in Wrecked, and her reaction to Tara's death, Buffy breaking down in Tara's arms, being like, don't forgive me, stuff like that. The fact that the performances were so good, that makes the already very tough moments just on paper even harder to watch, and I think that's why season 6 can be a bit of a tough ride for a lot of people. It could just make those really sad and difficult moments to sit through all the worse, because the performances were just so good and so realistic. And yeah, for the most part, I would say the season flowed very well. And I do applaud the inventiveness of some of the episodes. Obviously, Once More with Feeling was kind of a big example of that. But it certainly, you could tell they were trying new and different kind of things. And why not? You know, some things are going to land for some people, some things are not. At the end of the day, I don't think you can necessarily feel like you're particularly owed anything as an audience. You know, I think it's a shame if you don't like something. But at the end of the day, the people telling the story have the rights to tell the story they want to tell. Whether or not it goes down well or not, I think is another thing. So in that sense, I think they were very brave with some of the choices they made this season. And for me personally, I think most of it did pay off. I did enjoy what they were going for. And yeah, there's a lot of inventiveness and creativity this season. Some of it in like just the designs of like some monsters and stuff. Others in just like in terms of story decisions, you know, character-centric episodes, kind of like musical episodes and stuff. There's some very inventive stuff there that I really enjoyed. And I think it was always going to be difficult for season 6 to come off of season 5, which could have been, you know, the end of the show and a very satisfying ending if that could have just been it. But they had to kind of bring Buffy back from the dead and kind of undo a big sacrifice there, but still make it feel like bringing Buffy back needed to cost something, and there needed to be a big price for that. And they certainly, I think they certainly explored that avenue very, very well. So yeah, they took a lot of risks this season, which I do applaud them for better or worse. And there are some very, very few episodes this season that I wasn't that keen on. Only 1 or 2 at most, which I think is kind of very impressive, really. And that's a very similar thing that I had with Angel Season 3. There was only 1 or 2 episodes I was like, yeah, they're okay. And there's not an episode in Season 6 that I think I actively dislike, which is very rare. You know, at least with Angel Season 3, there was an episode I can think of that I just did not like. Not quite the same as Season 6, which I think says a lot. And we will talk about that a bit more when we come to favourite episodes this season, because the votes that you guys gave in and the favourite episodes that you guys voted for, my goodness, was that very, very interesting, and says a lot about Season 6 and how kind of divisive it is, I think. But we'll get to that in about 5 hours, so stay tuned. Where am I? I've already lost my place, which isn't great for notes this long. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, well, I think the season flowed very well for the most part. In terms of like the actual narrative choices, some of them didn't quite sit as well with me, and there's some that just weren't to my taste. I think we all know what I'm talking about. And that just goes back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, I can appreciate and understand what they were going for, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. And me not liking it doesn't mean I don't understand. Because I think a big example I can say of that is Thor Ragnarok. I get what they were going for with that. I know it's a very good film. Loads of people really, really like it. I understand, you know, they need to do something a bit different with that franchise, and it paid off. It was a huge success. Rave reviews, all sorts like that. Very different tone to the previous films. Just a very successful kind of thing, and clearly a very good film. I don't like it. I think it's too silly for my taste. Not for me. But I understand and appreciate what it was going for and the fact that it achieved what it wanted to do. That's how I feel about some things in Season 6, namely the trio. So that's kind of where I'm going from in terms of that. Oh yeah, so while I do understand and appreciate what they were going for, because it just wasn't to my taste personally, some of the things, namely like the trio's arc, it just felt a bit pointless in the end to me. Some big aspects of this season, and yeah, I already mentioned it earlier, but bad things happening to absolutely everyone. I'm like, not just like little kind of like, oh, that's such an inconvenience, oh, that really sucks, you know, my day's ruined. It was like some really awful shit going down to every single main character basically, that just felt a bit too much for me and a bit too unrealistic, I guess. That's not quite the right word, but it was just a bit too much, I would say. And yeah, just like the whole arc of the trio and stuff. I didn't see much of a change in terms of their characters and stuff. So for me, I was like, what's the point of having them if you're just going to go back on them? And again, I understand what they were going for with them and the point of it. I just didn't like it. But we'll leave that for now because I've already mentioned that like 7 billion times. So we'll save that for when I actually talk about the trio in the character section, again in about 5 hours. Oh yeah, and despite some of the narrative choices I wasn't that keen on, I am actually really interested in seeing like characters I really love make bad choices. And again, I don't always like some of them. You know, a big thing for me, the Xander and Willow affair in season 3. Fucking hate that plot point. Gross. Stop it. And just absolutely not to my taste. They could have done anything else and I would have preferred it. But I can appreciate that that needed to kind of happen and needed to be done because the Willow and Xander thing was still very up in the air, particularly for Willow and her feelings for him. So, you know, I can kind of get that. Whereas some things in season 6, I just don't think they needed to be there, and it didn't really add anything for me. And yeah, some kind of choices in this season that some of the characters were making I found very interesting because I think they justified a lot of the choices and they built it up quite well, and Willow's magic addiction I think is one of those for sure, and the fact that Buffy was kind of really fucked up being brought back when she was in heaven, and that sent her down this really dark, dangerous, like morbid spiral. So I can kind of understand that, and I actually found those stories very, very engaging and interesting. And again, that's not going to be to everyone's taste because season 6 is quite something, and every single reaction video on YouTube and Patreon, a fight started out. There was always some people debating, not even debating, just outright fighting and saying your opinion is bad, you should feel bad, which is not true. Opinions are opinions and they're allowed. So yeah, that's another reason I was kind of happy to stay away from comments, because everything just ended up being a fight, and that just shows how crazy the season is. And I really haven't been looking forward to this review because I dread to think what some of the comments are going to be. So you guys have fun. You guys have fun in the chat, but try and be kind and respectful, and don't be like, oh, I just don't get people who have this opinion. Like, try. Or if you don't get it, don't tell them that, because that's not going to help anyone. That's just going to start fights. So yeah, I think the fact that seeing characters make these bad choices can be a bit frustrating at times, and I certainly felt that frustration. I was very engaged and interested in that, because I like seeing characters I love be really tested. It's something that, this show's done a lot of. Shadowhunters did it a lot. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does it every fucking episode, basically. Doctor Who's done it, things like that. And despite my problems with, those narrative choices, despite my problems with the arc of the trio and stuff, they didn't actually take away from my enjoyment of season 6, which is why I think on it quite positively in the end. I think that's the power of Buffy. It just shows how good it is, and the fact that I do understand what they were going for with a lot of kind of choices and arcs in season 6, the trio included. The fact that I understand that meant, while I didn't like it, it didn't take away my enjoyment of the season, because I was like, well, yeah, I get it, it makes sense what they're trying to do. And I'm kind of happy about that, because I'd hate to not enjoy a season of a show I'm reacting to. So I've been like, can I just have the last few months of my life back? So I'm really glad that that's not the case with season 6, and I actually really did enjoy everything they tried to do. Or I can at least appreciate it, I guess. So yeah, while I had problems with season 6, none of them really took away from my enjoyment of it. And I enjoyed reacting to it. I enjoyed kind of editing a lot of those videos and stuff. So I think that's kind of a big tick in the good column for season 6 for sure. And then Willow's arc in particular was one of my favourite aspects of this season. And I really liked kind of seeing that downward spiral, and the whole Dark Willow ending of the season. That's another thing I was kind of like, I had a lot of what ifs about this season, is kind of the thing. Coming back to my season 5 review, I was looking through my notes for it to prepare for this review, for season 5, and I said, in terms of like the story arc, it felt like perfectly cooked, and they'd explored every single avenue with that story arc, mainly Buffy's arc I think I was talking about. I felt like they pursued every single avenue with it that they possibly could have done within that 22 episode season, and every avenue I kind of would have been interested in seeing them explore, they kind of did that. I don't think season 6 did that for me, and I think that's kind of why it's a bit of a shame that I feel like such a fully fleshed out and successful story arc in season 5. I think that doesn't help that season 6, it doesn't help season 6 that season 5 and that story arc that was so well rounded and done came before it, because you can't really help but compare to what's just come before. I'm kind of like, well, they could have done this, they could have done this, you know, maybe you don't have Dark Weather for an entire season, but I could have easily had like 4 or 5 episodes of her and then a bit less of the trio. I think that would have worked really well. So there's a lot, kind of like a what ifs, and like, oh, I wish they could have explored this a bit more. I wish we could have explored this a bit more. I wish we could have got a Tara-centric episode. I wish we could have followed her after the breakup with Willow instead of just like barely seeing her. So that kind of thing. I feel like with season 5 I was so satisfied that they'd explored all these main parts of the story arc that I wanted. I don't think season 6 got there by quite some way. But, you know, I don't think I'd have as much of a problem with that if this season hadn't followed season 5, which did that so superbly and so satisfying for me. I love a good arc that's well planned out and explored kind of every little diversion, at least for me, that I could have foreseen. They kind of did that. Season 6 didn't quite get there for me, even though I really loved what they did with a lot of the arcs, particularly Willow's, for sure, but I also enjoyed a lot of what they did with Buffy's. And yeah, I can see why this season is so controversial. You know, if people are like, this is my least favourite season, I hate it, I only enjoyed like a couple of episodes, they just kind of ruined the show, it didn't feel like Buffy anymore, they ruined all the characters. I can completely see that point of view. I'd be like, okay, fair. You know, it's when people try and force those opinions on others that kind of irritates me. So yeah, I can completely see both sides of that. But for me, personally, I definitely fall more on the side of the positive, who really enjoyed this season, which is good. I'm happy about that, because I'd hate to not enjoy it. I do feel like it felt very different, having moved networks and stuff. I feel like it may have something to do with that. Though I don't know, I kind of wish I wasn't told that they'd moved to a different network with season 6. So I wonder if I would have like seen like, oh god, this feels really different. Because I feel like I only really got that because I'd been told that they'd moved to a different network. And that was like way back in like season 2 or something that I think I got told about them switching networks. So I've kind of prepared for that for a while, but maybe that's kind of why. But for me, I do feel like it felt a bit different, but still really good, at least for me. I definitely... Someone says, oh, Buffy season 6, what do you think? And I'd be like, yeah, I enjoyed it. It's really good, which I'm happy about. And I know that's, you know, lots of people agree with that, but just as many people disagree with that. And I think that's what makes season 6 so interesting. The fact that this debate's still going on 20 years later, I actually think shows season 6 seems to be quite successful in what it was trying to do. You want a story that's going to kind of last for the ages and be talked about kind of forever, and they're still having that debate now about Buffy over 20 years later. So yeah, I think they're kind of successful in terms of that with season 6, for better or worse again. And yeah, I think this season definitely felt very adult, very heavy, very dark, definitely ahead of its time, I think, in terms of like characters like Warren and the trio. Definitely kind of felt ahead of its time, and very relevant and realistic to today's society, even if it didn't quite feel as realistic in the world of Buffy with like their freeze rays and stuff. That's another thing that kind of like put me off that. There's some things they did that a bit like, a bit weird. But what, again, you may not like that very adult, dark kind of feeling. I appreciate them trying to be like ahead of it. I appreciate that it is ahead of its time in that way. And I do think that kind of mood the show had, it was definitely kind of a reflection of the themes and the character arcs that they wanted to kind of experiment with this season. So, I feel like you couldn't tell this story of like Buffy going through like depression and self-loathing and suicidal tendencies. You couldn't tell that story in a season that has like really light-hearted, fun episodes. Because even What's More Feeling, it's very, very dark for a musical. And I think you couldn't not tell that story with Buffy coming back from the dead and exploring how she kind of feels about that. You couldn't not tell that story. It just doesn't seem fathomable to be like, okay, I'm back from the dead, I'm fine. Because it's such an interesting thing, like, oh, what if she's not fine? What if we kind of delve into that a bit more? And in order to do that, I think you need a very dark kind of season and to match that tone and make it feel natural. And I think they kind of succeeded with that. So I do think, love it or hate it with season 6, I think their approach in what they were trying to do with it was very justified. And the fact that it was very dark, depressing, stuff like that, I do think they were justified in what they were trying to do. But that doesn't have to, it doesn't necessarily mean you should feel like you need to like it. Kind of like how I feel about certain things. So yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts and discussions, observations about season 6. And now we're going to be revisiting some of the predictions I made for this season at the end of my season 5 review. How many did I make? 5, I think. 5 predictions that I made. The first one was that Buffy is going to come back, but we have like 1 or 2 episodes without her. And this is kind of like a yes or no. Mainly no. It's definitely more so no, because she was in episode 1. But literally right at the very end, and we had the Buffy bot for most of episode 1. And maybe a bit in 2 as well. I feel like, was the Buffy bot like torn apart? Was that part 2 or part 1? Can't really remember now. But, I think she did come back. Yes, well done, Liam. Not really something to kind of write home about. But it was like we had most of episode 1 without her, then she came back to life at the end of episode 1. Then she was kind of just back in episode 2. So kind of yes or no, but more so leaning back on the no. I think, again, it's another what if, what if she just was not in the first couple of episodes. Because it could still just be called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because it could be about her legacy and it's about her friend and stuff. But again, it's just another what if. My second prediction, a lot of people found a lot of amusement in this one going into the season. My prediction that Willow will continue to be a cinnamon roll. But people laugh and joke about that. They forget that I was really pissed off with her in season 3 with the whole Xander thing. I openly spoke about how disappointed I was in her there. So it's not like I've always been on her side and always been like, oh yeah, Willow's faultless, don't at me. She's my favourite character, for sure. I love her, for sure. But I will criticise her when I feel like she needs to be criticised. And I did in season 3. People seem to forget that when it came into this season. They're like, oh, you'll defend and forgive any actions. Like, I already haven't coming into this season. What are you on about? So yeah, I've put yes and no for this prediction. Because a lot of it is no, because, Dark Willow, not great. Flaying Warren, well done, but you probably shouldn't have done that. And, hurting her friends and everything, trying to taunt them, not good. Her treatment of Tara, and the use of magic to make her forget they had a fight, and then kind of sleeping with her after, it was rape. Because Tara was consenting to something, but she didn't know that she would not have wanted to sleep with Willow, if she remembered that fight. So she's very manipulative in that sense, and she always has a go hard or go home personality, I guess, when it comes to magic and stuff. She's very self-conscious in that way. She thinks magic is all she really has to make her interesting. A very addictive personality, as Buffy was saying in this season. So there's a lot of like, she did a lot of bad shit this season, completely awful stuff. And then we had moments like in As You Were, where she was trying to be like supportive to Buffy, be like, you know, if you want me to hate her, you know, talk about Riley's wife, you know, if you want me to hate her, absolutely do that, you know, I'll be fully supportive. And then she like clearly loved Sam, and Sam like took off and flew away and stuff, and she turned to Buffy and was like, what a bitch, you know, trying to be supportive and stuff like that. Very wholesome stuff. One of my favourite kind of moments of the season, I think, in terms of like funniness. Funniness, is that a word? I don't know. Comedicness. Who knows? So there were moments where Willow was very much cinnamon rolly, so I couldn't just say outright no. So because she did continue to be a cinnamon roll, she did, just not all the time. So there's that one. Then I also said Xander and Anya's wedding will be a big plot point. Big fat yes on that. You know, there's a lot of kind of pre-wedding jitters, mainly on Xander's part, but they had a lot of conversations about it. You know, being like, oh, should we tell them that we're engaged? Finally telling them, having the engagement party in episode 6. Continuing to kind of talk about it, stuff like that. And then obviously Hell's Bells happened. Whoopsie, wedding didn't go ahead. And then that's turned on to Anya becoming a vengeance demon again, Xander kind of feeling bad, Anya and Spike then, that whole kind of mess. So definitely was a big plot point in season 6 for sure, and had a whole kind of episode all about it. So definitely a big yes, well done me. And then I also said that a big returning character from the early seasons was gonna kind of come back. Again, yes and no, because characters did return, but I wouldn't say we got like a big returning character in early seasons, unless I'm like forgetting something really obvious. And it's not like, oh, Riley was in that last season, he came back, he was kind of a big character. I said like the early seasons, so I was thinking like series like season 1, 2 and 3. Someone from that era would kind of come back. And I don't think we got that, so I've kind of put yes and no, because we had like Jonathan, who was in those early seasons. He kind of came back, had a big role to play. So yeah, yes and no, but again, more leaning towards the no, because we didn't have like a huge, like, oh my god, that's a big name character to bring back from the early seasons. I remember just throwing that in there just to be like, ooh, mysterious. Because I had like no evidence of that, but there we go. And then my final prediction was that there would be multiple big bads, or like a group of villains for the season, because there's like a pattern. Like we had like the Master, who's like kind of mainly like singular. Then we had like Angelus and Spike and Drew, kind of like a group. Then we had like the Mayor, somewhat a bit with Faith, blah blah blah. The pattern's kind of continuing in that sense. And it's like, well, we had one big bad in the previous season with Glory, really. Let's kind of say, oh, there's going to be a group of them. Again, this is up for debate. I've put yes for it, because the trio are a group of people. They were like some big villains this season. Dark Widow was also a big villain. That's like 4 villains right there. But again, but Liam, Life's the big bad. Yes, it is. And Life's like a big bad. If you think about it. Life is a lot of things, so therefore it's a lot of big bads and a big group. But you know, I feel like it's kind of, there was a group of villains for Buffy to face this season, so I give myself that one. So yeah, again, in terms of predictions, not a bad effort, I would say. There's only like really one I was like, yes, which was the Sanya Anya wedding. That was the only one I was like, well done me. But how could I ever have predicted what season 6 was going to throw at me? Like, holy fucking shit. So I don't really blame myself for not getting like a great deal of it, like bang on, but what can you do? Maybe I'll do better for my season 7 predictions. We'll have to wait and see. I'll be very surprised. But it would be nice to do really well in like my last set of predictions for the season, you know? So yeah, that's kind of my predictions. Okay, so next we're going to talk about some of the characters this season. And again, we're not talking about every single character who's featured in every single episode of season 6, of course, because that would take a very, very long time. So these are just like the key ones I thought I should mention. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone out, I don't think I have, that I wanted to talk about anyway. And yeah, a lot to say. So yeah, as always we kind of start with like the main cast, so we'll go through all of them first. And it does make sense to of course start with Buffy herself, as is tradition. And will I be switching that up anytime soon? No. So yeah, Buffy in season 6, My God. Sarah Michelle Gellar, first of all, amazing performances yet again. Give Buffy a break in season 7, please. If anyone deserves it after the year they've had, it's probably Buffy. Holy moly. Ripped out of heaven by her best friends, having to kind of deal with being alive again when she like found peace with death. You know, going through a bout of depression, being quite suicidal, feeling like she didn't have a purpose anymore, she didn't want to still be around, and conflicting with that. You know, she still wanted to feel like she needed to look after her little sister and her friends now she was back, take up the duties again of being a vampire slayer. The weight on the world on her shoulders, you know, it's just kind of insane, everything she's had to deal with this season. Watching, you know, all her friends go through stuff as well couldn't have been easy for her. She's kind of saying in Hell's Bells, you know, Xander and Anya were kind of like her light at the end of the tunnel. They were her hope. And then even that kind of fell apart as well. It is crazy that, you know, all the things she's faced, I think just being alive was like her biggest foe and her biggest challenge so far. That's just so awfully sad, but it did make for a very fascinating character arc for her, I think, and very emotional. It was very emotionally driven, seeing her kind of break down over some of the choices she made, you know, just having to continue to exist and find a purpose all over again when she thought she was finished. You know, when things started with her and Spike, she kind of hated herself for that, but she also couldn't stop, and she just thought she was a bad person. She was like begging Tara to kind of say that and confirm that, because she's like, just, you know, tell me there's something wrong with me. The fact that she was kind of feeling that about herself, and that just that utter sense of self-loathing that she kind of had to deal with for like most of this season was just so awful. But it also shows the true strength that Buffy has to keep fighting, keep finding those reasons to just get by one day at a time before you find that reason to keep on going. And seeing her kind of discover that at the end of the season was very satisfying. It was nice to kind of have some light at the end of a very dark season, particularly for Buffy after everything she kind of went through. Yeah, she just remained a badass out the whole season, all her slaying duties and stuff like that. Tried to be a supportive friend when she could, and just having the strength to get out of bed every day, I think, can be a lot for people, and it's clearly a lot for Buffy. And that did mean she was kind of distracted from like Willow's problems and stuff like that, because she was going through her own shit, and you can't really blame her for that in the slightest. You know, on her own terms, she ended things with Spike, but then obviously that escalated. But we slowly saw her kind of realise she still wanted to be alive and take action and kind of make her own destiny in things in her life, like ending her relationship with Spike. She's like, okay, this is not good for me, I need to stop this, this is how I kind of progress and find a way to live again. And I love seeing her go on that journey this season. And it was good to see her have such a strong arc again. A, because it's her own show, she should have a very good arc every season, but also the fact that last season, my favourite thing about season 5 was Buffy's character arc. So the fact that she had another very strong one with season 6, she even had a haircut, best character development of all, and then seeing her try and fight to keep Dawn around so she wouldn't get taken away or whatever, getting like a steady job, trying to balance that with the Slayer relationships, all her friends and everything. She kind of just, the imagery of her kind of crawling out of her grave at the start of the season, crawling out of another grave at the end of the season, but being very different people, I would say, and older, stronger for what she's gone through, was just a really inspiring story, and I really love that Buffy could be the one to have that. And yeah, it was tough to kind of watch a lot of it at times, particularly, you know, the Spike stuff and Seeing Red. But there were moments where she had a bit of fun, which was nice, like mainly in Gone, I would say. She enjoyed kind of messing around with Spike when she was invisible. So there were some light-hearted moments with her, but, you know, she had a very dark storyline this season for sure, and I think Sarah Michelle Gellar just absolutely brought it home. I loved seeing this kind of all-powerful Slayer come back to life, and everything else basically apart from her being the Slayer was just a struggle. And she had to build herself back up again, find all these reasons, and find a purpose. And I just really loved how that kind of all played out. You know, as hard as it was to watch at times, I think it was a really, really inspiring story of this absolute badass, this incredibly strong woman, discovering what it is to live again, what it is to feel alive again, growing up, taking responsibility for herself and for her little sister. You know, after losing Joyce and everything, she kind of is dealt with so much tragedy. And I think that was another thing that I did really enjoy with this arc and with Buffy. Season 5, she lost her mum to, how I interpret it, natural causes. It wasn't about anything being like supernatural or anything in how she lost her mum, and I think that was kind of what they were going for. That was a really kind of powerful story. That was life kind of really just, you know, knocking the wind out of her, and something she can't fight and defeat in terms of losing her mum to something just like natural like that. And they kind of bled that story onward into season 6, where life was kind of her biggest enemy. So to see her kind of struggle through it, overcome it, come out the other side, hopefully journey on to become an even better person than she already is, now that she has that sense of purpose again, I think it's going to be really nice to see. And I really, really loved that whole journey for her in this season. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Xander, and man, I do feel like, at least for the earlier parts of the season, I think Xander was a bit more in the background. Him and Anya, I think, were in danger of that quite a bit. You know, the early episodes was just, let's tell them we're engaged, no, let's wait. And that was kind of that debate for the first little bit of the season with them, and obviously episode 6 is when they kind of like, surprise. But I think that definitely changed in like the second half more so. Maybe it's just because it's more so in my memory, because it's more recent. But definitely the last like third of the season for sure, like from Hell's Bells onwards, it really kind of stepped up, focusing on him and everything, and the consequences of him kind of leaving Anya at the altar. But, you know, as someone who can relate to Xander at times, I do think they did a lot of really interesting stuff with him this season, and a lot of relatable stuff, some very humanising things. And again, that's not going to sit well with a lot of people because, you know, by doing a lot of stuff he's done, he's hurting some other characters that people love. So you can kind of get that. And some things, you know, I completely disagree with him this season. His treatment of Anya when he found out about her and Spike was, I think, completely unjustified. The same, I guess, in how Buffy was kind of treating Spike about that too. And, you know, some of Xander's attitudes are, I think, very dated and outright incorrect. So sometimes he has rubbed me the wrong way, particularly in like the earlier seasons, I would say. I still think season 4 was probably Xander's best season for me. I think he was fantastic in that season, but I think he's been consistently good ever since then, like the past couple of seasons, but he does make a lot of mistakes. Normally when it comes to women, let's be frank. And he absolutely should have said something so much sooner about his fears about the wedding. You know, he did tell her, I'm not scared of, you know, the marriage, I'm just scared of the wedding. He was honest about that, but not honest enough leading up to that, you know. And the fact that they planted the seed for him like having these concerns for so long, right all the way through this season really, all the signs were kind of there, and it wasn't like the biggest shock to me that it didn't kind of work out, because Xander kind of you know, was very nervous about it. And then when we like met his family and everything, and we kind of saw he was terrified of becoming like his dad, we've known that for a while anyway, seeing how his parents' marriage is, he didn't want to become that, he didn't want to drag Anya into that. And obviously the kind of, I guess, the false vision of his potential future that he was shown by his future self, obviously kind of really made that decision crystal clear for him, because he thought that was it. Interesting that he's been manipulated by a false prophecy of the future, not unlike a certain Englishman on Angel this season. But yeah, that I think was a big mistake on his part to not speak up sooner, but I can really relate to that kind of fear of himself and the fact that he's kind of his own worst enemy in that moment. He loved Anya so much, he also didn't want to hurt her in the long run, and hurting her in that moment by walking out on the wedding could have potentially spared her from a whole rest of her life of pain being married to him. But obviously it turned out that that future wasn't necessarily going to be real, but it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense, I guess, because he'd do anything to not become his father, because he kind of hates, you know, being in that shadow so much. And he didn't get a chance to walk down that aisle. I talked about it in the grave reaction. He kind of did get to walk down the aisle in the end when he was like walking towards Willow, and into the season to try and win her back, win her soul back. So there is a lot of kind of deep love in Xander, and moments like that at the end of the season I think showcased that there is some good in him. He makes a lot of mistakes, granted, but who the fuck doesn't? Very, very human thing to do. And yes, he did go about the wrong way in some things. In Entropy, he was just outright wrong, I would say, in his treatment of Anya. And, you know, times like that I think really did rub me the wrong way. But, you know, he's Buffy's heart. So I like that we did get some moments of them showcasing that near the end of the season, in how he managed to bring Willow round and talk around, like the yellow crayon story and everything. Very wholesome. I like it when they can highlight that friendship. So the trouble is, I think, with Xander is he cares far too much about people at times. That can be a bad thing, to care too much. He cares too much about how he may potentially be viewed. He's very self-conscious about that. We've seen a lot of that, particularly in like the high school years of Buffy. We saw how self-conscious he was. He didn't want to, you know, be seen as lesser or not like manly enough. He didn't want to be embarrassed in front of people. And kind of that's really come home in a big way, I guess, with this season and some of the mistakes he's made. But I can also understand a lot of where he was coming from, even if he really did not go about things in the right way. But at the end of the day, I think season 6 did prove that maybe Xander's use of his love for other people is not his strong suit, and he definitely kind of mucks it up quite frequently. There is a lot of hope for him, and I think that's kind of what they went for as well at the end, with Giles and Anya's scene together, where Giles was like dying or whatever, and he was like, oh, Xander saved us all, he saved all of us, and you know, Anya seems to kind of enjoy hearing that news and kind of felt some peace with that. So maybe there's hope for those two going forward. I don't know if they're going to patch things up or not. But I think Xander is a very loving guy. He has a lot of love to give. He just hasn't worked out how to give it yet in a good way for the most part. Particularly not when it comes to like romantic relationships and romantic entanglements, that's for sure. So he's still learning, and you know, he's still very, very young. He's still very young to get married, I thought. And you know, they could always try again, but he's just a very flawed guy. I think season 6 showed everyone's flaws, I think, really. And yeah, I think they did some really interesting stuff with him, very relatable stuff. But at the end of it, you know, when it counted, I think he could save the day. He had a lot of heart, and I think not really coincidence that they kind of ended the season with probably Xander's best moment of the season, when he kind of talked Willow down, saved the world and saved everyone. Because that's who he's capable of being. He doesn't have the capability of being that all the time and phrasing things in the right way, behaving in the right way. He's still very much kind of on a learning curve with that. Hopefully in the final season we can really see him mature even further, hopefully. Because, you know, I think he's gotten tons better than the man he once was, you know, in the high school years. So hopefully we can continue to see that. But I liked a lot of what they did with Xander this season. Even if I feel like they didn't use him as much as they maybe should have done at times. When they displayed his heart and, you know, a lot of the faults with it, I think he can really shine, and that's how I see him anyway. I know a lot of people don't like him, and again, that's fair, because at times he's very unlikable, but it's a very human thing and very real, I would say. Willow. Oh heckings. Where do we even begin? I've already said her arc this season is one of my favourite things about it. The fact that, you know, I don't want to just constantly repeat myself about things I've already said in reactions, because this season I've talked about Willow a lot in my afterthoughts about how I think she thinks magic's all she really has. She's kind of been broken down by high school years and stuff, thinking she's only started to get noticed and appreciated when she started using magic, so she really went to town on that. Like Buffy was saying, very addictive personality. She's always trying a bit too hard with things, you know, to repair bridges with Oz in season 3. She went a bit too far with it. A bit too far trying to wipe Xander's like feelings for her in season 2 with a spell. Foreshadowing. And just how they've kind of really escalated how much she's relied more and more on magic, to the point where Spike could kind of manipulate her using that in season 4 in the Yoko factor. You know, she's such an easy target in terms of that. And season 6 really exploited that when Amy kind of came back. You know, Willow brought Buffy back. She's like, well, if I can do that and that dark magic and shit, and we got away with it in the end, you know, we stopped that demon that came through with her, we're fine now. She's like, well, I can do anything, and that's really kind of, it got to her head in a big way. She definitely got quite the ego from it. Amy did not help matters at all. And then, yeah, she just complete misuse and mistrust of it. Like the people in the club with her and Amy, her wiping Tara's memory of their fight, trying it all over again to try and like make Buffy forget that she was ever in heaven when she found that out, and obviously that caused all the events of Tabula Rasa, which was a bit of a nightmare. And then Tara left her after that. She was starting to kind of recover later on, but obviously she did have that accident fairly early on when she and Amy went to Rack, and then the car crash when Dawn got injured. That was a big wake-up call for her. Then she kind of started to be like, right, I'm clean, you know, going cold turkey. But then I think it was Older and Far Away, I think. It turned out she still did have a few things hidden. And then Tara obviously then did the spell herself, but she hadn't completely kind of cut those ties. Then she was really getting better, making so much progress. Tara's death just sent him that big spiral. But I really, really enjoyed the kind of magic is an addiction kind of story that they were going for with her. Just how that really escalated to a point you thought, okay, maybe she's on the mend now. Boom, Tara's dead. And Dark Willow's here. Oh my, I loved Dark Willow. I kind of wish we had a few more episodes more with her. It just seems to be like it was over before it really got started. I was like, oh, I kind of wanted a bit more. Even just an episode or two more, I think, still would have worked, at least for me. Again, I'm a big Willow fan. And yeah, a lot of people came for me about, you know, defending her and trying to justify her actions and stuff. And I think some people seemed to confuse me trying to justify them with forgiving her for them, which is not what happened. But I think trying to get inside characters' heads and work out where they're coming from and everything, like I've kind of spoken about Willow in the past, I think that's what makes Buffy such a fascinating and wonderful show, that you can do that with characters. You know, you're blessed to, in some shows, to have like one or two characters that you can really kind of peel away the layers at, but the fact that basically every single character in Buffy you can do that with is kind of a blessing and crazy. And the reason these reviews are so fucking long all the time, because the characters section of these reviews is always the longest by far. So yeah, I loved Willow's arc, her kind of going off the wagon. Hopefully she's going to be on the path to recovery now. I like that, you know, her first love kind of talked her down from it. And yeah, it seemed almost inevitable that something like this was going to happen with her. And I liked the idea of her becoming like a big villain at the end of the season, hunting down the trio. I was always going to be for that. And yeah, just some really, really interesting, powerful stuff. Alyson Hannigan, as always, was awesome this season. And yeah, it's sad we kind of had to lose Tara, I guess, to get to that point with her. I don't think they necessarily needed to kill her off to get to that point, but you know, I like that they really explored, again, Willow's kind of big flaws as a person. And that addiction kind of overwhelmed her in a crazy way. And we'll see, I guess, the after effects of that. Hopefully they'll kind of deal with what she's going through and she'll come out on the other side. Whether it's like she just stops magic altogether now, she never gets back into it, or she tries to just stick to the good stuff and finds a new kind of better way to use magic and a healthier way to use it. That'd be cool. 'Cause I'd hate for her to have to kind of like give it all up all together. I wouldn't blame her for doing it. I wouldn't blame other people for making her do it. So we'll have to wait and see. But I really liked that kind of spiral for Willow this season. I thought it was a really fascinating arc for her, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do in like her final arc of the show. At least that I can like physically watch, like live action. So yeah, we all know I love Willow. She's amazing, and she had an amazing arc this season. She did a lot of wrong, but it's season 6, who didn't? So yeah, there was that. Speaking of doing wrong, Spike. Spike's a tough one. Great character, shitty person, I would say. James Masters is fantastic. And again, it's all like, well, you know, he's a vampire. They had to do the whole thing in Seeing Red to kind of remind you who he was. I'm like, to remind him of who he was, you didn't have to make him try and rape the main character and put her through even more trauma than she's already going through. You could have had something happen to him and the chip broke and he just started killing again, reminding us of who he really was without doing something so kind of horrific to Buffy and put her through that. Maybe go a bit far with what they tried to do there, and then he could try and actively seek out a soul or something. I think they could have done many different directions with Spike that probably would have sat better with me, because I always knew who he was. I always knew he was evil and a soulless vampire, but you didn't need to do a reminder, I think, in quite that kind of holy shit way. But speaking to Seeing Red, you know, I really enjoyed Spike as a character. You know, his reaction to Buffy coming back was very wholesome, him looking after Dawn and everything. He just seemed to kind of find a bit of a place. And again, it mostly stems from the fact that his chip stopped working, so he kind of had to ally himself with them. The fact that Buffy could open up to him about things, he was kind of trying to be somewhat supportive of her there. When she was opened up about the fact that she was in heaven, you know, he was the only one who was aware of that. What he's kind of saying to her once more with feeling and something to sing about living. Thought there were some nice moments there, and he had some really good character stuff, and again, it then formed into a very toxic relationship that they had going on, and Spike just did not want to let that go for anything really. You know, he seemed to accept it a bit, you know, Hell's Bells and stuff, they had some really nice moments together. Then things started to escalate a bit, and Seeing Red happened. So up to that point, I really loved Spike as a character, and you know, you're allowed to enjoy a character, but also know they're an awful, shitty person. And I don't know, I'm still weighing up whether they went a bit too far with him trying to rape Buffy. Very uncomfortable, and I did kind of like, I can't be arsed with Spike now. If he hadn't gotten his soul back at the end of the season, I think I would have just been like, I don't give a shit about seeing Spike anymore. But the fact that they have done that, and the fact he wants to give Buffy what he deserves. I didn't like how they framed it to make him seem like he was just like wanting to get his chip removed, because I just think that was a trick to the audience just for the sole purpose of trying to trick them, which isn't clever. The fact that he was aware to give Buffy what she deserves, he needed to get his soul back. The fact that he kind of wanted to get his soul back and nearly dies trying to get it. There's that spark of hope there. And the fact that he has his soul now, he's going to feel what he's done for all these years, kind of like what Angel went through, what he did to Buffy, hopefully, was really going to get to him too. I think that's going to be a very fascinating story for him, so I think he might be one to watch next season for sure. And I think it was kind of the only thing they could have done, in my eyes at least, to kind of save him. There's so many ways you could have had Spike do something horrific and not have to go there. I mean, he'd already had so much heavy shit in that season as it was. I don't know. It just... There's representation for stories. There's stories and dramatic stuff for entertainment. There's raising awareness of things that people go through in real life, like soap operas doing similar kind of stories. I just don't know if any of those examples can be applied to Spike in Seeing Red. I don't know if they went a bit too far with it, but I am back on board with seeing more of him now that he has a soul, and I'm fascinated to see what that story's going to be. And up till seeing Reg, you know, Spike was one of my favourites and a really enjoyable character that I love to kind of see. And he's still a really great character. I just don't know if they've kind of tainted him in a way they didn't need to still maintain the essence of who Spike actually is. So we'll see what happens with that. But for the most part, I did like what they did with Spike this season. See, a very toxic relationship for Buffy. But they did have their moments, and it was like quite enjoyable and sweet at times, but obviously very, very bad for both of them. And him trying to kind of push that and get a bit more, it's just like, stop it. So we'll see what they do with him next season, but yeah. Overall, I did like what they did with Spike throughout season 6. And again, I've mentioned already, you know, this season really pushed characters that you really love and care about, made them make horrible choices and stuff, and Spike's clearly no exception to that rule. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see where they go with him. But overall, Spike is Spike, and another really enjoyable character to watch this season. You know, James Masters is very charismatic. I just hope they haven't kind of pushed him to the point of no return for me as a viewer. Because even though I know he wasn't a very nice person, and he might, oh my voice, he might still not be a very nice person, even with a soul, who knows, you know, people with souls can be assholes. We'll have to see what they do, but hopefully they haven't kind of gone too far with that. So yeah, that was Spike. I think I could talk about him in a lot more detail, but I don't think that's a real reflection of how I feel about him coming off season 6, you know, so I'm not going to put loads of passion into analysing him and stuff if season 6 kind of took that passion away, you know. Let's talk about Dawn quickly. I really enjoyed Dawn in season 6. Obviously she has only been in 2 seasons at this point, but I think season 6 has been her best season out of her 2 seasons. I liked the idea of seeing her kind of grow, feeling a bit left out. I think that turned to like stealing things and stuff like that, which did happen near the end of the last season. That started. I like that they kind of paid that off. And just her frustration and that fear that everyone was going to leave her, I actually think is very relatable, especially after everything she's kind of gone through, and a very traumatic experience, I think, with her and Glory, then losing her mum, then losing her sister, very close together, getting her sister back, but then she still felt quite a distance from her. That couldn't have been easy, I imagine, because obviously Buffy was going through her own shit, that she couldn't really deal with her own sister, so Dawn was feeling very left out, and then everyone else was kind of ignoring her as well, which wasn't great of them. And yeah, things kind of continued to go from there, and she made some stupid risks, like in All the Way. She did form some really nice bonds. I liked seeing her be able to make some bonds outside of like the main group of people. You know, her and Clem near the end of the season, particularly, I think had some really, really nice interactions. So she is capable of kind of having these friendships and bonds, and just developing as a person. You can really see her mature a lot. She had her moments. Get out, get out, get out! Shut up, shut up, shut up! It's kind of a big low for her. I think I loved her in Wrecked, I remember that. When she kind of stood up for herself and punched Willow, or slapped Willow or something. I was like, yes, Dawn. That was easily one of my favourite Dawn episodes, I think, that episode. And even after that, she kind of grew to grow concerned for Willow again and everything. She was always so insecure about the fact that Buffy didn't want to be alive anymore. And she was just so frustrated by Buffy always keeping her away from all the drama, even though it's just an unavoidable thing, inevitable thing that she always gets dragged back into it, because her sister's the Slayer. Her life's going to be dangerous. And I like her trying to spend so much of this season trying to prove that to everyone around her. Be like, you just need to let me in, because it's just an inevitable fact of life. This is something we're going to have to deal with. And that kind of really hit home in the finale, I think. And when she helped out fight some of those creatures with Buffy, be like, oh, you know, you think I haven't been watching you and stuff? So she's grown very capable, she's matured quite a lot. Still has her moments, but she still is a teenage girl, so you can kind of let that pass. And I think she's very mature for her age, considering she's actually like 2. So yeah, I really enjoyed what they did with Dawn this season overall. You know, her trying to talk Buffy down in Bargaining Part 2 was really sweet. and I love them kind of exploring the relationship with those two a lot this season, and just to see how much Dawn's already matured a lot and how much she's kind of had to go through and deal with. She's starting to really come into her own as a person, I think, and the big thing with season 5 was that, oh, the Slayer's a sister now. She was the plot device, she was the sister's, she was the Slayer's sister. I feel like season 6 really made her, she's Dawn, and I really kind of appreciate that, and I can't wait to see what's next for her. So yeah, I really like Dawn's kind of journey of self-discovery, coming out of her shell, standing up for herself, being like, you can't ignore me anymore. I am part of this. You just can't avoid that. And Buffy's acceptance of that as well was really nice to see. So a very nice kind of bond between those two sisters. So I really liked Dawn's growth this season. Hopefully that can continue in the final season as well. Then Anya, I also really enjoyed this season. I already mentioned with Xander, I feel like she may have been a bit underused, particularly in the first half of the season. But she's always had some killer lines. She's so funny. I love like the deadpan humour of her, like not quite understanding things at times because she's still kind of getting used to being mortal. Just the excitement of the wedding and everything for her was just kind of setting us up for the almighty crushing blow of Hell's Bells, and then her becoming a vengeance demon again after that and sleeping with Spike. It was a lot, but I really, really enjoyed her, particularly in the last group of episodes again, kind of like with Xander. And the fact that her becoming a vengeance demon again didn't outcast her from the rest of the group, kind of like when Cordelia and Xander broke up in season 3, and Cordelia was just like barely in it after that, really, because she couldn't be part of the main group anymore. They still found a clever way of keeping her involved, being able to like track Willow down, and then obviously the stuff with her and Spike. They kept her around, they kept her kind of actively involved. I loved everything with that. Her comforting Giles in the finale when he was like dying and stuff, and just kind of trying to thank him for like coming back anyway, even if he was like going to die and the world was going to end. The fact that she couldn't go through with it when she tried to get vengeance on Xander, she just couldn't. It couldn't happen for her because other people couldn't wish on her behalf to do it. She couldn't make them do it. And even when it came down to being able to do it, she just felt like she couldn't because she still very much loved him. And I think that's the most human thing of all. So they really have found a lot of humanization, I guess, in Anya. So I really enjoyed that arc for her this season in particular. And yeah, she's always so funny, and it's nice to provide some relief in quite a dark season. I feel like Anya, you could rely on her for that when required, but she could also break your heart. As we've definitely seen in The Body already with her, but Hell's Bells, you just felt so awful for her. So yeah, I really enjoyed that kind of story for her this season, and I'm intrigued to see what her role's going to be next season, considering she's still like a vengeance demon. Maybe seeing what Willow went through and seeing her come back from that's going to make her be like, maybe I shouldn't be a vengeance demon anymore, maybe I should follow in Willow's footsteps and give up these powers that could be used for a lot of darkness. I think maybe she'll continue to be very torn between the demon side of her life and the human life she was kind of building for herself. Does she want that back? That could be kind of an interesting thing for her. So yeah, Anya was great this season. Really, really enjoyed her. Probably my favourite season for Anya, maybe, so far. She just kind of slotted into the group so easily, I think, in season 4. And she just continued to thrive and become a really cool character in her own right. You're kind of like with Dawn, she's not just, Dawn isn't just the Slayer's sister anymore. Anya isn't just Xander's girlfriend, Xander's fiancée anymore. She's just Anya, Anyanka. And that's kind of how she was introduced in the first place, as a demon. And to see where she was there to where she is now, still a demon again, but just so much more to her, I think is really satisfying. That's something I love about TV, being able to do that over many, many years. So Anya's fantastic. We love her in this house. And speaking of someone we love in this house, Tara. No. Pure cinnamon Tara. I'm still pissed off that they killed her. The one kind of selfless, pure, majestic light in such a horrible, horrible season of darkness and death. And they kill her. Just as she gets back with Willow as well. That was just extra mean. Extra mean. And yeah, Tara was easily the best character in season 6 for me. Easily. I think she could have also had the best arc in season 6 if they'd actually given her one after her and Willow broke up. Could have been so interesting to follow her a bit more and have like a Tara-centric episode of what her life's like outside of the Scoobies. It was very similar to the Cordelia season 3 situation, breaking up with Xander. She just wasn't around or part of the action anymore. Kind of happened again with Tara. I don't think it was quite as bad with her as it was with Cordelia, but they didn't quite succeed in the way they did with Anya, like the second half of the season after her and Xander broke up. Like that last little section, she was still very much part of the action and stuff. They didn't quite achieve that with Tara, which I think is a big shame. Because Tara's fantastic. I loved her relationship with Buffy. Her sheer concern for her, the friendship they kind of struck up together was wonderful. Such a supportive person. I love when they put that on the show with that. She kind of broke up with Willow because that's what's best. She needed to kind of show her that you need to deal with this, or I can't be part of this really toxic situation that you are kind of creating for us. She has a beautiful singing voice, which also helps. And yeah, she was just so pure and wholesome. I think they did need that in such a dark season. And then for them to just take her away from us 3 episodes before the end was a true crime. I will not get over that anytime soon. Just rude. And yeah, I just love that she's kind of the one I think you would go to for advice on things. And she provided a lot of advice for people. She was, I think, kind of a comfort in a home for a lot of people. Whenever she was on screen this season, especially when things started to really get messed up and dark. It's like, oh, thank God Tara's in this scene. Thank God Tara's here. Everything's going to be okay now. She was just there's such warm and graceful energy to her. And it's very kind of Oz-like energy, I think, in what she kind of brought to the table, and the fact that she couldn't do much wrong. And maybe that's slightly unrealistic, whatever. But sometimes you just need that when there's so many flawed characters in the show. I mean, Oz did do wrong as well. And I think there was definitely something Tara said or did once I didn't agree with. Can't remember what season that was in though. But you know, no one's perfect. But Tara's goddamn close. And especially this season. She was an angel. We love her. She was the only one who shouldn't have died. And yet she did, because life is unfair. That's what season 6 is kind of about. But yeah, I adored her. She's so lovely, such a nice kind of warm, loyal person. And they showcase that a lot with, you know, her wanting what was best for Willow, even when they weren't together. Her still trying to have a relationship with Dawn, even after she moved out of the house and everything. They still kind of hung out. The really nice bond with her and Buffy that was forming when she like came to Buffy's birthday and stuff. When Buffy kind of broke down, Tara was like, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. You came back normal. And showing up to the wedding with Hell's Bells, slowly kind of forming that romantic bond with Willow again. And then tragedy strikes just when they get back together. And Tara's attitude to be like, you know, can we just kind of skip all that nonsense and just, can you just be kissing me now? Very, very wholesome. She was just such a wholesome character. And I'm so sad that this season kind of had to take her away from us. Yeah, I just adored Tara so, so much. So loving and caring and kind and genuine. And she's the friend you'd want to have. You know, she's the person you'd want on your team, fighting in your corner. She'd always give you the right advice. She always knows exactly what to say. And I'm very, very sad that we're probably not going to see her again because she's gone. And that is kind of a big heartache. You know, Willow started off this season with Tara by her side, and she brought Buffy back from the dead. And then she ends it with Buffy by her side, but Tara's dead. So, some very tragic kind of mirror imagery with that, I suppose. And, I don't know, I just feel like maybe they didn't need to kill her. They definitely didn't need to kill her off. I think they'd already kind of really gone to town on the whole theme of the season anyway. And they could have found another way, I think, for Willow to have turned. Even if she like, thought Tara was dead, then she goes evil. It turns out Tara's actually fine, still alive. But it's kind of too late, Willow's too far gone. Now we have to stop her. Xander talks around, Tara talks around, something like that. But still, Tara was fantastic. I adored her. So, so sweet. Someone you'd always root for no matter what. You're always on her side because she just deserved the world. But the world did not deserve Tara. That's basically the gist of it. And I'm forever angry that they killed her. So yeah, best character in season 6 for me. She really kind of held it together, I think. If you didn't have a character like Tara in season 6, it definitely would have been too much, for sure. So thank God for Tara. Rest in peace, my love. So yeah, that's kind of all the main cast, I guess, or like the main build characters, because obviously Tara did get build for one episode. Bastards. So yeah, we're going to move on to another set of characters now, and starting off, of course, with Giles. Oh, I want Giles to be my dad. Giles is just so good. Him kind of trying to deal with Buffy's death at the start. Did I just say Duffy's Beth? If I did, sorry. Buffy's death at the start of the season, him then going away, coming back a few episodes later when she's still alive, trying to be there to support her a bit. He's like, oh, I'm still going back to England, and just his kind of initial arc of, I'm standing in the way of Buffy becoming a fully grown woman, taking responsibility for things. If I'm still here, she's not going to grow up in the way that she probably needs to. So I need to kind of remove myself from the situation. He went. Everything went to shit when he went. But God, did he get the best goddamn return entrance. Like, that was incredible. I'd like to test that theory. Oh, badass. He was so great with like his magic at the end of the season, and he still had this plan for Willow to kind of absorb this magic from him, to kind of relight that spark of humanity in her so someone could save her, like Xander. Just showcasing just how smart this guy is like that, how caring he is, that concern he had for Buffy. Maybe he shouldn't have left, but he did come to that realisation at the end of the season. He was like, I should not have gone, should not have left you. And I hope we get more, basically. But him, particularly in the last couple of episodes, was so badass, so cool. What a guy. I'm sad we didn't get more of him, but I understand, you know, the real life kind of thing around it, surrounding Anthony Head wanting to kind of spend more time with his family. Completely understandable. It is a shame, but you can't really be angry at a guy wanting to spend time with his family, can you? And what we did get at Giles was still really, really good fun. We got some nice comedy with him in like Tabula Rasa, and him like bursting into laughter in Grave at the start as well. But we had some serious stuff with him as well when he was like dying at the end of the season, and him leaving Buffy and kind of telling her that he was leaving, and you know, the struggles he was going through, like, am I standing in her way, like in Once More with Feeling. So they did do some interesting stuff with Giles, even if he wasn't in like loads of episodes, and it was still really, really cool to kind of see him almost mature in his own way as well, and like mature even more so, and still learn his own lessons, even though he's like the older member of like the group. He's still learning his own lessons about life along the way, and we kind of did see that with him, like, I shouldn't have left you, I should have gone about this better. So he's still learning as well, which is again a very human thing to do, because I think you're always learning for your entire life, no matter how old you are. So yeah, Giles, badass, I love him, such a caring guy, what a gent. Hope we see a lot more of him in the final season for sure. Just such a nice father figure for Buffy, and all the Scoobies really, and his concern and love for them, you know, the fact that he was like, you concern me, Willow, you can't go down this path. Desperately trying to save these people that he cares about. Even when like him and Willow had that big fight early in the season as well, he still rushed back to save her. Wholesome. We love Giles, he's great. Okay, then we have Jonathan, Andrew, and Warren. The trio. Okay, I'm just gonna... Okay. I mean, I feel like I've already made my thoughts on them kind of clear with this review. They're good characters. They are. I just did not need them this whole season. The way they introduced them with like, hey, do you want to just take over Sunnydale? Okay, sure. Throwaway joke. For one episode that would work. Like the geeky jokes, haha, we're nerds, blah blah blah. I get it. That absolutely would work for like 1 or 2 episodes. For like most of the season, those jokes kind of got old for me very, very quickly. And that is coming from me, a big fucking nerd. And yeah, I've kind of been racking my brain for a long time being like, why did this not work for me with these guys? As characters, they absolutely work. They're very relevant today, particularly someone like Warren. I think he was easily the most successful character out of the trio because he just infuriated me so much. And, you know, just that kind of superiority complex he kind of has, just the toxic masculinity they kind of all represented at times. I've just been like, why did it not quite land for me? Why is this just not doing it for me? And I've really thought long and hard about it, and again, talked about it already, I understand what they brought to the table, I appreciate it, it was absolutely successful because some people really enjoy what the trio bring to the season, in terms of the themes and stuff, it absolutely works. For me, it's just that disconnect and it didn't land. I did not need it to be this long. If it had only been a couple of episodes, we got rid of them, it's kind of like a multi-part story with them as villains or something, absolutely would have worked. If it had just been Warren, I think I would have enjoyed it more, because he's just that type of guy. I don't think you necessarily needed all three of them. And I think the fact was, like, a villain like Dark Willow, for example, she was kind of born from the motivation of losing Tara and her addiction to magic and this big spiral, and we really were invested in that story and that character already, so therefore you're interested in that villain, and she kind of had these things going against her, you know. She had these struggles along the way, you know. She had people kind of taking Andrew and Jonathan away, so she was like struggling, and it was hard for her to try and achieve her goals. You know, Giles and his magic prevented a kind of threat to her as well. She was telling Xander to kind of stop talking to her as well near the end of the grave because she knew that he could get through to her. So she had a lot of threats against her in that sense. She had a lot of obstacles to overcome. You know, the Masters are like a big villain. He couldn't leave his cave thing, and his minions were kind of shit. And Jealous, we saw him kind of get like affected by the ghost, and I only have eyes for you. He actually, not that he knew it, he had Spike kind of working against him, that kind of didn't play in his favour. The Mayor had an unexpected attachment to Faith, and he was completely kind of destroyed when she got put in the coma. Adam had this kind of complex, like, what am I? All these different things, and they did some interesting things, I think, comparing him with Riley, in a way, like, oh, we're brothers, blah, 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 blah. Glory had no idea who the key was, couldn't really track her down. Her minions kept failing her. She kept having to switch between Ben all the time, so that's kind of a hindrance on her abilities. With the trio, I just feel like, for me, there wasn't enough obstacles in their way, except for themselves, and again, that they played that as a joke, so I couldn't really take it seriously. Of course, it did provide some very funny moments that I did laugh at, but just to sustain it for the whole season, it did not work for me. It seemed like they didn't have enough obstacles to kind of get over, and their big obstacle, and my favourite episode probably of them, was Dead Things, and I was like, oh my god, if the trio is always like this now, this is going to be really good, I'm going to be really invested in them. And I don't think they really followed that through, because obviously things with Katrina escalated, she was killed, they were kind of trying to cover it up, it was kind of really getting to them at times, and we continue to see a bit of that with Jonathan. But honestly, if you compare the trio when we first see them in Flooded to the end of the season, obviously one's dead, but he's still kind of the same guy. They said, watch Flooded, and then watch Grave, I couldn't have seen the shred of development. I think they come across as exactly the same people, and they didn't really have many obstacles in their way in that sense, and there just wasn't really enough kind of stopping their plans for me to get invested in it. So I think it's much more interesting when the villains are having a bit of a hard time. They're going through their own struggles and personal issues and stuff. And I just don't think they got enough of that with the trio. I think they had a bit too easy of a ride. And again, it's because life's the big bad, Liam. You don't understand, life's the big bad. I get it. But they devoted so much screen time to those guys. Just being goofs. And even when the stuff with Katrina happened, being like, oh, we got away with murder, pretty cool. And only Jonathan kind of continued to feel a bit burdened by that. And, you know, Warren I can understand it with, because he's just a piece of shit. So I completely understand why he'd be just like, forget about Katrina, blah, 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 and move on. And Andrew was kind of a bit shaken at first, and he's like, oh, that was cool, we got away with murder. He like never mentioned it again. And and even to like Buffy and stuff at the end of the season, he was like, wasn't really wrapped up with guilt about it. And I feel like that would have intrinsically changed a person, but instead they just kept playing them as jokes and hapless people, even though they'd kind of gone too far and it kind of really escalated. They still just carried on doing like these weird little nerdy things and plots, and I just don't think it worked for me because of that. I just feel like they didn't develop, they didn't change and learn from the obstacles they should have faced as villains. Their reason for starting, yeah, I get, you know, you want your attention, you want stuff like that, you just want to be pervs on women, but paper thin, played off as a joke motivation at the start of the season. They didn't really develop it any more than that. And again, maybe they don't need to because they're not the real big bads, but when they devote that much screen time to them, instead of like giving a Tara an episode to herself, exploring stuff with her, that's when I kind of get a bit like, oh, they could have done so much more than just these nerds doing the same jokes and not really facing any real struggles. And even when they did with Katrina, that's like the only big obstacle, I think, to their plans that could have actually changed and developed their characters, and they just didn't. They were exactly the same characters at the start of the season as at the end. For me, I don't really like that. When I'm watching a 22 episode season of television, I'd want to think that at least even the villains would have some development, or some more obstacles getting in their way. I felt like there just wasn't enough of a challenge there for them as villains, so therefore I did not get invested in it. And even Jonathan kept, you know, he was realising that I'm in too deep here, I'm in over my head. You know, he was very affected by Katrina's murder. He's kind of turning against Warren in that sense. He helped Buffy out in that fight in Seeing Red. It's like, you know, destroy the orbs or whatever. I was like, oh good, they are developing Jonathan. They are doing something with at least one of them, that's good. And, you know, they escaped jail and everything to kind of get away from Willow. He was like, if there's anything I can do to help, you know, I feel like I should be helping us. You're keeping us alive. That was all good. And then in Grave, she's like, Mexico? Okay, bye. They paid it off with a joke again. I was like, have you really learnt nothing? Like, get a fucking ladder, get some rope, help Buffy and Dawn out of the pit. Again, they just played it as a joke to get rid of them. And they like sat in a van, I think, at the end of the season, like this weird guy looking all like awkward and stuff. And I was like, it just, they kind of learnt nothing and didn't really change then. And again, that's kind of the point of them, I get it. That's just the type of people they are. But Jonathan had this really nice speech with like, we need to pay for our crimes, you know, when all this is over we are going back to jail. And he just instantly, because Buffy and Dawn fell in a hole, he was like, oh, Mexico. First chance he got to escape, he kind of took it. Even after that big thing where he like stood up to Andrew as well, and he was like pointing the sword at Xander. And I was like, oh, they're doing something with him at last. You know, it was already too little too late at that point for me. But then, nothing. They just didn't have the development that I wanted and wanted them to have. So I just could not get behind it. And yeah, that's kind of why the trio didn't work for me. That's kind of, I really thought long and hard about it, and that's kind of the conclusion I've come to. And I don't know, maybe in years to come I'll go back, and now I know what to expect from the trio, I probably would enjoy them more rewatching it, but I'd still just be like, oh, what if Tara had some scenes instead of this shit? These same old jokes. I don't know, it just, their scenes for me were a bit of a slog, and the easiest edits I had when I was like cutting down the reactions, I normally really struggle with scenes to cut in editing Buffy. I really struggle to get it down to under 10 minutes when I'm editing reactions. Easiest things I've ever had to do editing Buffy. So, oh, a really long trio scene, skip, don't need to put that in, because it's just me going. So I think that's telling me as well, like, I'm clearly not enjoying it if I'm kind of silent for a lot of their scenes when it's just like the three of them. Very easy edits, and that kind of says all I need to say. The actors are great. Warren, I think, as a character is very successful. I think I would have preferred it if it had just been him, maybe. Or if they had just like given them a character arc instead of starting to give Jonathan the character arc, then undoing it for a joke. So yeah. Not a fan of the trio, basically. It kind of fell flat for me, but that's okay. Not everything's going to land in a TV show. Everyone's going to have their favourite and least favourite characters and stories and stuff. I think I found mine. You know, even characters like the Master and stuff, I'd rather have him as a big bad than see more of the trio, you know? Because I actually, for what he was, the Master was kind of enjoyable, and They just did not do enough to, I think, test the trio or develop them enough for me to get invested in their story. Yeah, if it had been a couple of episodes, I would have really thought fondly of them. And like I said, Warren is a fantastic character because he made you really frustrated. He was just a piece of shit, and you wanted to root against him and you loved to hate him. So you kind of bought into that character. Whereas, like with Jonathan, they kind of started to give him more of a redemption kind of arc, then they didn't follow through with it. I'm just like, well, that's a bit pointless then, isn't it? So maybe we'll see them again, or the two that are alive we'll see again next season. Honestly, I don't want to see them again, but if they do, maybe they will do something really cool and interesting with them, who knows. But that's kind of my thoughts on the trio. I know I've talked it to death, I apologise, all I ever do is hate on the trio, but if something doesn't work for me, it's not going to work. Those are my reasons why. I understand what they bring to the themes of the season, I understand that life's the real big bad, but that doesn't mean I should like it, even if I understand it, and I don't. So that's the trio. The actors are great. On paper, I think the characters work. They had their funny moments, don't get me wrong. I loved the trio in Dead Things, so it's not like I hated them all throughout, there was just no hope. And I'm just like, no, I absolutely refuse to believe that the trio could have potential, because they did in Dead Things, and I thought, oh, this is going to be the start, things have gone crazy now, this is going to really affect them and change them, but you basically couldn't have told for the most part, particularly near the end of the season, that any of them had even gone through that. So, a bit like, yeah, with me. At least they did do Warren and Dark Widow showing Warren like that image of Katrina kind of taunt him, but Warren was like the one who's kind of unbothered by the whole thing because he sucks. But that did make him an interesting villain, so Warren I think definitely succeeded, but the trio as a whole, no thanks. Speaking of, oh that was rubbish, doesn't matter. Amy, who I'm actually surprised we never saw again after Willow cut ties with her. I thought she was going to come back in like a big way, maybe like be Dark Widow's assistant or something. Or she'd like hunt her down, kill Amy as well, I don't know. I don't know why she would, but I don't know, maybe it's because I wanted to see Amy die, because she was a rat. But still, it was a kind of another love to hate kind of situation. I liked the idea of her kind of being turned back into a human, readjusting to life, getting this kick out of magic, and she was kind of like a catalyst for Willow's real downfall leading up to the events of Wrecked. And I did like Willow kind of standing up against her and be like, you need to go. If you care about me, if you're my friend, you need to leave. I can't have you in my life. And I did enjoy that arc for Amy. And yeah, she's kind of more so there, I think, to really kickstart Willow's arc for the season off in a crazy way. And she definitely did that, so I think she was successful in that sense, and very aggravating. But it was nice to kind of finally get a bit of closure on that whole story. You know, was Amy ever going to get turned back? And they finally did do it, and yeah. They had a bit of interesting stuff with her as well, with like, is she going to talk to her dad? Is she going to tell him she's back? She's very reluctant to kind of do that. Kind of a bit of a complicated history there being hinted at. Again, I wish they could have delved into it maybe a bit more. But I think she was just kind of there to be like the bad influence friend who introduced Willow to drugs and the true highs that magic can bring. So she's definitely more of a catalyst. But I think as a character she was successful in that. And another kind of love to hate person, I guess, with that. So yeah, that's Amy. And then Clem, I thought we'd mention briefly as well, because I always do enjoy seeing like good demons, I guess, or like harmless demons. Angel's done it quite a few times with like Merle or something. Clem's another great example of that. He has a lot of charisma, he's a lot of fun. I liked his interactions with Spike, really liked his interactions with Dawn. He just seems like a very wholesome kind of demon, and again, in a very dark season, it's nice to kind of have a character like that, and to have a character who's actually like a demon as well. You know, him at like the wedding and stuff, all very good, I would say. He just brought a lot of levity to a very dark season. Again, there's not a lot to him. You don't know a lot about his backstory and stuff, but I don't think you necessarily need to for a character like Clem. And he did provide some actual use. You know, he helped Dawn track down Rack's place. So, you know, he did kind of get thrown into the plot at times like that. He had some really good lines. And you can just tell he's like a really sweet soul and like full of heart and it's just like a refreshing change when you see like a good demon in a show like Buffy or Angel, and Clem was actually a very, very good example of that. I thought he was a lot of fun, really interesting design to him. He basically, if Dobby from Harry Potter was really tall, it would be Clem, and I think that's why I like him. So yeah, Clem was a lot of fun. I thought I'd just shout him out because it was nice to have like a fun, happy-go-lucky character in season 6 in particular. Then also Halfrick. I love the kind of thing of her being, I think, is it Cecily, is that her name or something? From Spike's past as William, like the guy, or the girl even, that William was in love with. I love that they kind of really hinted and seem to have confirmed that they are one and the same, so she becomes a vengeance demon. Tying her into Anya, obviously, straight away kind of makes it a bit more interesting because she's connected to someone we're invested in. I loved her kind of really casual delivery of some lines, and she's very sassy. And her kind of role in Older and Far Away as well, how she kind of trapped herself in her own spell and she like couldn't leave unless she ended the spell. I actually thought that was very funny and a very almost, in a weird twisted way, endearing, because Halfrick is kind of annoying, and I think she's supposed to be. Adding those seeds of doubt, I guess, into Anya about Xander's intentions and trustworthiness, and in a way she was right, so whoops. But yeah, I thought it was more so the fact that we were meeting another vengeance demon, connecting something to Anya's past, I think was actually very, very interesting. And she popped up quite a few times. She was in an unexpected amount, but she did provide some really interesting kind of... Again, she was more like a catalyst to Xander and Anya's plot in a similar way Amy was with Willow's, and I think she worked really well. I thought the actress was great. She had a lot of fun to like the presents she brought. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed her role in things with that. So Halfrick was a lot of fun. Did she die? Was it Old and Far? No, she was in Hell's Bells, wasn't she? I don't think we saw her again after that. No, maybe it was Hoffrin, wasn't it? We saw her again after that. He made her a vengeance demon again. For some reason I had it in my head that she died in Old and Far Away, but she didn't, because we saw her again after that. But I don't know if we will see her again, because now Anya's a vengeance demon again, like, do we need more of her? But if she does turn up again, that'd be cool. But I thought Halfrick was kind of an interesting character. I do wish they did more of like the potential connection with her and Spike if she was this Cecily woman, but they didn't go there, and that's fine. Then I thought I'd mention Rack as well. He was kind of like the drug dealer. I guess the kind of magic is drugs metaphor with this season. It's kind of a thing. He was kind of the embodiment of that. And just like Amy sending Willow on a bit of a dark path and things really escalating her when she met him. I thought the actor did a pretty good job with that, kind of making him a bit weird and creepy and a bit unsettling to watch. So in terms of that, I think the character worked really well. It was actually very satisfying to see Dark Willow kind of drain him, because he was a bit weird. You smell like strawberries. You smell like strawberries. Alright, personal space. And yeah, just kind of a different type of character to meet, I guess, and it's almost like a Buffyverse drug dealer type. Interesting kind of guy, I guess. So he was an interesting addition to the season. And then Riley, seeing Riley again was an unexpected but fun surprise, because I love the episode he was in. And just to see how much he's grown and kind of changed since Into the Woods. He's got a wife now, he's really found a calling, I think, with his work. He's definitely matured and grown a lot. He's not really tied down by toxic masculinity, I guess, as much anymore. I think he's really found a sense of self and purpose in a similar way to how Buffy was trying to find a purpose this season. So that was really fun. That was really great to see. And yeah, I feel like Riley in his appearance was like the Riley he was always meant to be, and he's kind of living his best life, doing what he does best. And I was really happy for him to see that, and to see that he found a lot of happiness. Because, you know, I don't think he was quite appreciated enough where he was. And, you know, it's not like Buffy is required to love Riley in a way she may have loved Angel before. You know, he's not entitled to that love, but I do think he deserved a bit of happiness. I do think he was actually a decent, genuine guy. And again, I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion, actually liking Riley, but what can you do? But I think a lot more people do like him in As You Were than they did in like season 4 and 5, so that's kind of fair. This definitely was the best we ever saw him, and it was just nice to kind of get a bit of closure to the whole situation with him and Buffy. And yeah, he was just a lot of fun to see. I really enjoyed him. and to see how much he's kind of grown and changed in his absence. It was very satisfying, and I'm glad he's kind of doing what's best for him. And Sam, I want to mention her as well, because she was awesome. One episode, I loved her. I wanted her to join the Scoobies. She was badass. She was very open and honest and genuine. You know, she clearly cared a lot for Riley. She also just seemed like a very easy person to get on with. And I really, really loved the energy she kind of brought to that episode. And her interactions with Willow and Xander and stuff are very wholesome, kind of talking about weddings and stuff like that. She was just exactly what Riley needed, I guess. And she was just so cool, you know. I think a lot of it was the actress as well, but just the way she presented herself and the energy she had. You just desperately wanted to be her friend, I feel like, and that definitely came across with everyone. You know, even Buffy and Willow trying to be supportive, and they just couldn't hate her because she was just so awesome and cool. So I really enjoyed her. She was easily one of my favourite supporting guest characters in season 6 by a long shot. She was just so good. Really loved her. And again, I don't know if we'll see Riley and Sam again. I feel like they really tied up their story in a nice way. I mean, as you were, but I wouldn't be against seeing them again, because Sam was so cool. Loved her. Very briefly talk about Joyce and Hank, because obviously we only really saw them in like this dream mental institution state that Buffy was kind of going through, but it was nice to kind of see them pop up, to see Joyce's face again. Oh, Joyce. And kudos to the actor who plays Hank for keep coming back for these, you know, well, not really semi-regular, just very rare appearances. And even when we do see Hank, it's not normally real, which is kind of funny. It's just like a passing reference to him normally. And he's not like a particularly nice guy, I would see him in real life, because he doesn't seem to care much for his kids. But regardless, it was nice to kind of see them pop up in normal again, even if it wasn't like technically them, you know, it's kind of like this vision and stuff. But I thought I'd give them a shout out because I miss Joyce and I'm very sad. Then we also had Katrina. I like that they kind of revisited her and I Was Made to Love You in that sense, and Ron kind of targeting her because he's a dickhead. And her treatment of her, you know, she definitely deserved better, for sure. And like put her in like this like maid outfit and then fucking murdered her. Granted, they didn't mean to kill her. Warren didn't mean to kill her. But they had to cover it up and they just didn't take responsibility for it. It's just all, yeah. And the way they treated her and how the trio treated all women basically was just gross and despicable. So again, forgive me for not really getting that into their characters and their role in things. It's kind of like with Spike, you know, after seeing Red, I kind of shut off from his character for most of the season after that. And yeah, I just felt so bad for poor Katrina, but it was cool to see them revisit her if they were going to have Warren show up a lot in season 6. It made sense. And it was cool that they kind of had her still haunting Warren through Dark Willow in Villains as well. So I thought I'd bring her up. Also briefly, the Buffy bot was kind of fun to see her in the opening episodes, and then she got destroyed. Rest in peace, Buffy bot. We'll never forget you. But it's just nice to see Sarah kind of play a different side to Buffy again, and to have Buffy in a lot of episode 1 in particular, without having like to bring Buffy back alive right at the beginning of the episode. So yeah, cool addition. I was not on board with the Buffy bot at first. I thought it was a very bizarre kind of thing, and again, it's something that's tied to Warren, so I should have known. Like, freeze ray and the invisibility ray, I wouldn't have been all about that. Again, it's another reason I didn't get that invested in the trio. It just didn't quite connect with the world of the Buffyverse for me, things like that. But still, I do think they made the Buffy bot work in the end with like tying it to Spike and stuff like that in that half, and then having her be like the cover for Buffy being dead was actually very clever. And yeah, I liked that, but she did kind of serve her purpose and got destroyed, so there we have it. And then I thought I'd mention Razor and the biker gang from Becoming Part 1 and 2. I just thought it was an interesting kind of thing to have a demon biker gang. I thought it was a very interesting concept. Again, paper thin really, they were just there for Buffy to beat up in Part 2, when she kind of crawled out of the grave and stuff, but I just thought they brought a bit of diversity to the different kinds of villains we'd had to face, because they were just kind of always on bikes. And yeah, I always like when TV shows that like have like supernatural verses and versions of reality like Buffy does. I always like it when they do like comparisons to real world things, so we have like this demon biker gang. I just thought that was kind of a neat little concept, and they maybe could have done a bit more with it. but you know, they were the villains of like the opening episode of a season, so I think the villains are always going to suffer when they're in the premiere, unless I like big bads that you keep seeing again and again and again. So yeah, I thought they were just kind of an interesting type of villain to face, even if they weren't like particularly interesting or deep. Then Justin from All the Way, Dawn's potential vampire love interest boyfriend. I love the twist with him being the vampire when you thought it was like the creepy old man had something going on in that episode. I like how he's kind of there for Dawn's story more than anything else, and the connection of him going like all the way to turning her into a vampire and stuff. And he kind of provided more of a thing for Dawn to start growing up, because we saw a lot of her growing up this season. So we saw her have like a romance with a guy who seemed actually genuinely interested in her, but Dawn still had to grow up a bit, make that hard choice to actually stake him, even though she seems to do care about him. So it was more so for Dawn's kind of story arc and that advancement that I think Justin had a nice role to play in this season. But I did like the twist with him, and I felt like the one-off episode kind of thing. I think he actually worked fairly well in terms of like advancing Dawn's arc. Okay, so next I want to talk about Sweet very briefly, because I just think the concept behind him is just so interesting. Like, the way of having this whole musical episode happen is with this demon who makes you like sing and dance and stuff, and sing how you're feeling. I think that was a very kind of genius idea of making the musical episode work in context of like the Buffyverse like setting. I thought the design of him was very cool. I thought the person that got to play him, I think he's actually like quite a famous singer and performer and stuff, so it's cool that they got him to do it because he was really great. And yeah, just the concept of this villain who kind of won in the end, you know. He kind of came along, didn't get his queen that he was after when he was summoned and stuff, but he did cause a lot of drama and chaos and killed a few people, and kind of forced Buffy to reveal this really dark secret to her friends and kickstart some huge events for the rest of the season. So, you know, he got away with it. You know, he disappeared, and that was that. So it was a very interesting idea to have this kind of villain for an episode who actually does kind of win the day, gets away with it, and I assume we'll just never see him again, unless they do another musical episode, which I don't think they will. But I just thought I'd mention him because he's kind of seems to be one of the more iconic kind of villains in the show, so far at least, and in one of the most iconic episodes. And just the fact that, you know, we had this very charismatic, clearly talented demon come along and cause a bit of a ruckus, and to really threaten to tear the Scoobies apart and to get people to reveal these awful dark secrets and desires and stuff, in the kind of guise of them just singing and dancing. It just seems like such an innocent, happy, entertaining thing to do, but there's this deep darkness to how he goes about things and how he conducts his kind of business, you know, having that poor guy or whatever it was like tap dance himself to death and like set fire and everything, and that then led to them being able to show Buffy's suicide attempt in not as much of a darker way as it would have been to go quite literal with that scene. So some really dark stuff there, but just to see him kind of do all of that and just kind of win the day and get away with it, I thought was a very fascinating idea, and not something you see every day in Buffy or most TV shows, to be fair. So I kind of like them kind of breaking the mould with that being, you know, a lot of that episode broke the norm, and Sweet kind of really represented that. So I thought he was a very effective kind of one-off baddie. Obviously not someone you could have around all the time because of what his whole shtick is, but it was great to kind of have this demon who actually won and really got one over on the Scoobies and wrecked them up a bit. So I just thought I'd mention him because he's a really cool addition to this season, and it was nice when he compared to some other like villains and stuff they had to face this season. Sweet, I think, is very unique, not just to season 6 but to the show as a whole, I would say. So yeah, another really interesting kind of addition to the Buffy mythos, I suppose, with him. And who's next? Oh yeah, just talking about Xander's family in general. So I think it was really cool to finally see a bit more of Xander's family and actually get to know a lot of different kind of characters and just meet this extended family of his. Something I wish we'd gotten more of a lot sooner in the show, for sure. And I wish I did something similar with Willow, maybe in season 7. Obviously we've met her mum in Gingerbread, but I want to say a bit more about what her family life is like and what the dynamics are. And they really did do that with Hell's Bells. That was something I really applauded the episode for finally exploring some more of his family and to see exactly where Xander came from, how he was raised, who he was raised by and stuff. So, you know, Xander's dad in particular was an arse. Did not like him, not a very good guy, and you can see why Xander did not want to become like him. So introducing Xander's family I think really helps contextualise him as a character. Maybe helps you at least begin to try and understand his actions in Hell's Bells, even if you don't agree with them. You know, I didn't agree with what he did at the end of Hell's Bells, but I think you can see things leading to that. And yes, just getting to know a bit more of Xander's kind of close family and seeing them and seeing exactly what that home life was like for Xander in, you know, these first few seasons when he was still living at home and then living in the basement and stuff. It was kind of a very interesting thing. I wish we'd gotten it a lot sooner and maybe we saw more of them, but at least we got something. That's something to applaud them for. I think, again, it's just a really nice way of informing a bit more about Xander's character and how he is and why he is the way he is. So yeah, in particular kind of spotlighting Xander's father, because what a dick, basically. So yeah, it was very nice to kind of, not nice I suppose, 'cause they didn't seem like the best lot of people, but very cool and nice for Xander's character development, I suppose, if nothing else, to actually see where he came from and where his roots kind of are always going to lie, and he's always going to be tied to them no matter how much he wants to escape from it, I suppose, and how much he fears becoming a lot of what he saw in his family. So I thought that was a really nice way of kind of contextualising Xander in Hell's Bells. Then also quickly, De Hoffrin. Again, in Hell's Bells we only saw him very briefly, but then he offered Anya her job back, so it was cool to see him. I always quite like that character, the way he plays things very straight, in particular like Something Blue, for example. He's like takes Willow away and like offers her this job and she's like, thanks but no thanks. He's like, okay, that's a shame, well, you know, here's my number, if you want to call me, here's my card. So yeah, just to kind of see him pop up and have like an interaction with like Halfrek, and again, in the same way that Xander's kind of family was there in Hell's Bells to really contextualise him, having him there to contextualise Anya, remind us of where she came from, who she used to be, how much she's kind of grown. It's a very kind of cool idea, and you know, him coming along with a gift and everyone's reactions to like the demon side of the wedding party. Very, very entertaining and a good part of Hell's Bells, considering things got quite sad and dark in the second half of the episode. It was nice to have those light-hearted moments, and just to see De Hoffrin again, I think he was a very interesting kind of character and very cool design as well. So I like seeing him. And then I guess the final thing I really want to shout out to was, not to say much of a character because we didn't really get to know them, but the demon that Spike was kind of spending a lot of the last few episodes with, who kind of gave him his soul back, put him through all these trials and stuff. Again, is another character I want to shout out because he's kind of a means to an end for another character story arc, kind of like Amy was with Willow, Halfrek kind of was with Anya and Xander, Rak was with Willow as well, just kind of something like that. It's kind of advance Spike's story, hopefully going into season 7. But again, it's another different kind of demon that we hadn't quite seen before. It's a different kind of villain to kind of face, much like the biker gang or Sweet. They kind of bring something different. Because they seem to have these quite advanced kind of skill set and power set and enabled to give people what they want and restore souls. Maybe a bit convenient to the plot, I suppose, but you know, they did have a couple of episodes of Spike fighting off all these things and going through these different challenges and stuff, so it was an interesting kind of way, I guess, of having Spike get his soul back. And more than anything, I think it was just a new addition to the lore and an interesting kind of thing there, raising questions like why hasn't people, you know, why didn't Spike go to him before anything like this really kicked off, and like, well, just make Buffy love me, you know, why did he do that in like season 5, or find this guy, what, has he just found out about him now, you know, what's the history behind it, that kind of mysterious past. You know, some questions I think you don't need answers about characters, and I do kind of like that this kind of demon-y thing was just like there, and it seemed to be like people knowing it was there, almost worshipping it a bit. But you know, exactly what was its origins, how did it get there and stuff like that. Maybe there are some answers about it in like the wider lore or comics or whatever, but for now I kind of like the mystery behind it. I just thought it just makes the universe of the Buffyverse feel big, having these like mysterious demons and characters that we don't have a lot of backstory for, or we don't understand where the powers come from, how they've always had these powers or not, stuff like that. So I thought I'd kind of give a shout out to that demon-y thing as well at the end, because he may be playing a big role in Spike's arc in season 7 potentially, so I thought I'd shout that out as well. And that's basically it for all the characters in season 6 that I wanted to talk about. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone major. If I have, I'll kick myself. I still kick myself for missing out Wesley in the season 3 review. But luckily I got a chance to talk about him again when he like showed up in Angel and stuff, so that's fine. But yeah, I feel like those like the big kind of players for season 6. It was definitely a more like personal season. I feel like I didn't have as much to say about the secondary characters this season, apart from like Giles and the trio, mainly. But I think season 6 did feel very personal in that sense. You know, there's a lot of personal stories, you know, the big bad, I guess, being life itself more than anything. It's something very personal to the core characters, so I feel like I have a lot more to say about them and their journeys, and not as much to say about the secondary characters. Because I think the scale of season 6 compared to like fighting a god in season 5 is obviously a lot smaller, which isn't a bad thing by any means. I actually think that helps in like advancing characters in this way. But yeah, we had a lot of interesting kind of characters this season. Some great character development for our main cast, of course. Again, the trio fell flat for me personally, but that's fine. We did have some great new additions though, like Clem. I love the closure we got with Riley, and seeing Sam was cool. And yeah, different types of villains, as like whether or not they're like particularly complex or anything is another matter, but like Razor and the biker gang and Sweet, the demon in the cave, stuff like that. And then all these characters like contextualize other main characters like Xander's family, D'Hoffrin, etc, etc. So we had a really nice range, I think, of characters this season, some really cool designs, and again like the production behind season 6 I thought was phenomenal in terms of like the you know, directing and lighting, costuming, makeup, all of that. Still very, very strong with season 6. That hasn't really changed even switching to networks and stuff. I don't know if they like changed much of their crew or whatever when they moved networks. I don't know how much they could really keep from the WB. So really, really great stuff. But there, I think from like a visual standpoint, I think the continuity was pretty similar to previous seasons. So it wasn't quite as jarring in that sense, I suppose, going to a new network, which was great. So I really did enjoy a lot of the character stuff we had this season. Some really dark, gritty stuff, of course. Some of it fell flat for me, some of it really, really worked. But yeah, that's something you can kind of say for every season of every show ever. Everyone has their favourites. So yeah, really great set of characters this season for sure. Okay, so you may have noticed a bit of a location change. We're now downstairs. My dad needed to go to bed, which is fair. We're both up quite early tomorrow. But we're going to be away for a couple of days, and I don't want to delay the review any longer than I already have, because life is crazy. So yeah, just had to move downstairs, but it is what it is. And anyway, now we're going to talk about themes for season 6. And as always, just the disclaimers for the themes. This is just what I kind of got from this season. I surely have missed stuff that even I've thought of at some point watching the season that I've probably just forgotten about or whatever. These are not like every single one that I'm sure people could have come up with. I may have missed some out that might seem obvious to you, so let me know obviously what you kind of got from this season as well. And with all the examples for these themes, it's not every single one I can think of, but for the interests of time, I've only just picked out like a few different examples. So yeah. As I was kind of coming up with all these themes and thinking of examples and stuff for them, I was kind of going back to the same kind of characters and the same stories again and again, which again kind of adds, I think, to the very personal feel of season 6 as a whole. So that was just something I kind of picked up on as I was kind of making the notes for this review. So I thought that was kind of an interesting observation as well, just kind of adding to how personal and intimate I think some of the plot lines in season 6 kind of felt, and why I felt I had a lot more to say about the main characters than the supporting characters this season. So yeah, there's that. And themes, anyway, getting back on track. The first one is addiction. I think the two key examples are obviously Willow and her addiction to magic, and obviously Amy and Rack getting involved in that. That's spiralling out of control and causing a lot of havoc this season, for sure. And then I guess Buffy's kind of addiction to Spike, in a sense. She always found herself going back to Spike, not being able to help it, because that's when she really could feel something, was when she was with him. And yeah, hopefully they've both managed to break those addictions. And I think that's obviously going to be an ongoing process next season. I'm sure they can wrap that up, but big theme like this season was addiction. And, you know, there's obviously a lot of parallels to magic being like drugs and getting high on it, stuff like that. So that was a key one, I would say. Then the theme is like depression and facing your lowest moments, falling further than you may have done ever before. Obviously Buffy is a big example of that. And depression she kind of went through not wanting to be alive, when she kind of found herself alive again, and the depression she kind of fought through with that. And Willow and Tara kind of breaking up, Willow losing Tara as well and sinking lower than ever with her magic addiction, Dawn's kind of car accident and stuff, they kind of sunk low there. Tara being present for Buffy's lowest moment, I think, when she kind of broke down and said, you know, tell me there is something wrong with me. Xander and Anya as well, kind of their low moment. It's obviously their wedding kind of not going to plan, Xander walking out, and then Anya, I think, kind of went through a little spell of depression herself, at least a low mood, when she became a Vengeance Demon again, slept with Spike, etc, etc. And then I think maybe the lowest moments also could count with the trio, because they did some very sickening and just low stuff. And I think Jonathan kind of did see that, and he went through kind of a period feeling quite low about the whole Katrina situation, and that was really kind of plaguing him and made him realise that he was kind of in over his head. Whereas Andrew and Warren, I think, you know, they did sink very, very low. They just may not have registered it or really saw it within themselves, because they suck. So there's that. And also Dawn kind of going through her own low moments and depressed moods as well, I would say, when she felt very ignored. Her lament in Once More With Feelings, a big key moment there as well, and the fact that that then caused her to kind of become a kleptomaniac, I suppose. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily depression in all those examples. That's why I kind of put it with like your low moments or falling quite far, because Buffy was unmistakably, you know, depression she kind of battled with this season. That was a big thing for her. Maybe everyone else, it was just them kind of falling quite low. So yeah, that's one other theme. Then another one was the idea of sex and violence, which I think vampires have kind of blended together a lot in the Buffyverse. You know, certainly with Spike, and also Justin in All the Way. You know, him and his friend were comparing going all the way, which obviously normally would mean sex, to like turning Dawn, for example, into a vampire. So that kind of blurred lines between sex and violence between the vampires is seen in Justin, is also clearly seen in Spike, and the sexual relationship that Buffy and Spike kind of went on together. You know, it was very violent, and you know, they'd constantly like hit each other and stuff like that. And then obviously the attempted rape as well. It's kind of blurring those lines there. So it's not a particularly pleasant theme. A lot of these themes aren't particularly nice in season 6, but what can you do? So yeah, Buffy and Spike are obviously another big example of fitting into that. Warren and Katrina, you know, they once kind of had a relationship, and Warren and the trio were kind of using a lot of women, kind of like sex bots in a way, and Katrina was no different when they kind of brainwashed her momentarily, put her in the maid's outfit, and then it kind of turned violent there. Katrina tried to escape and came to her senses, and then Warren ended up killing her. So that's another example. And then Willow and Tara, more so in terms of like the sex part of the theme, with Willow raping Tara, really, when she kind of wiped her memory, and they continued to kind of have that relationship. So that's not necessarily violence, but, you know, it's kind of emotional kind of manipulation, I would say. So still a very kind of violent, awful act that's kind of tied into the sex. And then again, Spike and Anya, those two kind of sleeping together led to a bit more violence where Xander tried to like attack Spike and stuff. So there does seem to be a lot of that in the Buffyverse. You do tend to get punished for having sex in Buffy or Angel. And season 6 is a clear kind of example of that on many occasions. But yeah, it's a lot of that is like the thin line between sex and violence, I think, for vampires, and they seem to get off on that. And yeah, Buffy and Spike's relationship, their toxic relationship, is a big example there too. Then once again, toxic masculinity, I'd say, was a big theme. I think we had that in season 4 as well. I think that was a theme I talked about in season 4. Again, I think Spike is a big example of this. In his relationship with Buffy, his unwillingness to just let it go when she was like, we're done, this isn't good for us, I was using you. And even when he tried to then rape her, he went back to his house. He was like, you know, look what she's done to me. You know, he was kind of almost blaming it on her and not accepting it for himself. So there's that. Xander and his family, the fact that he kind of saw a lot of toxic masculinity in his father for sure, and he didn't want to become that man, but in doing so, he's kind of very insecure about himself and a potential marriage and himself as a husband and potentially a father one day. That's kind of led him down a spiral. And his treatment of Anya in Entropy, for example, he doesn't like, you know, he kind of often sees Anya as his and like a prize, as an object, as opposed to a fiance, a wife, a life partner, etc. So his views sometimes are very toxic in that sense, and he definitely fits into that theme, and it's kind of sad really, because he definitely gets a lot of that just from his own family and his fear of himself and his insecurity in himself and his masculinity. And that kind of then goes on to hurt the people that he actually does really love and care for. And then another example is Warren and the trio and their treatment of women, trying all these different methods to just kind of get laid or get a peek, and Warren just awfully treating women as well and hypnotising them to being like sex slaves for them. So obviously their plans to Katrina and stuff. Those three were kind of vile humans, and very gross, and definitely fit into that whole kind of thing. And as soon as their kind of masculinity is threatened, you know, particularly with Warren, where Buffy was kind of confronting him, saying he's just like a scared little boy and stuff like that, and he just wanted to kind of have that power over women. He got all defensive and whiny and got a gun and ended up shooting Buffy and Tara. So definitely the trio fit into the toxic masculinity kind of theme there. Then another one, the idea of self-destruction and self-destructive behaviour, and also self-loathing I've kind of thrown into that as well. We saw a lot of that. Buffy and Spike and their ongoing sexual relationship was very self-destructive, because they were kind of keeping it secret. They knew, and Buffy knew, that her friends wouldn't approve, and she kept going back for more because she felt like she couldn't stop, and it's the only way she could feel. So even though it was a bad relationship for her, she kept going back to it anyway. Very self-destructive in that sense, and very self-loathing as well. She kind of hated herself for being alive again, not having a purpose, feeling like she wasn't good enough. So she had like a job at the Devil Meat Palace, and she felt a bit out of place there and a bit overwhelmed there. Trying to keep up with loans and making sure that she could stay as Dawn's care and stuff like that. She had a lot of self-loathing there. So that was definitely a big deal. I think Dawn had a bit of self-loathing and a bit of self-destructive behaviour as well in her kleptomania, stealing things, you know. Eventually that was all going to come out. Eventually she'd get caught, but she kept on doing it anyway. I think she resented a lot of people for kind of feeling out of place and like ignoring her and making her feel quite lonely and isolated. But she may have also kind of felt a bit of anger towards herself for that as well. Especially, you know, in the light of her being the key and everything that she went through in season 5. She kind of had a real identity crisis, and there's probably a lot of self-loathing going on there, and that obviously fed into some self-destructive behaviour for her. Willow is obviously a very big example of like self-destructive behaviour with her addiction to magic, not being able to stop. That caused Tara to kind of break up with her. Things escalated from there. Dawn got injured, she went clean, lost Tara, it all went crazy again, and as Dark Willow she really kind of tried to push her friends away and insult them and try and really get at them in any way she could, just to kind of keep on being this newfound version of herself. Then Xander and Anya, and Xander's kind of being quite self-destructive there, because he didn't just talk things through with her about his nerves about the wedding. You know, they could have just made it a private affair in order for him to be able to just get through the wedding, so then they could happily be married. But in, you know, being afraid of what he'd potentially become in his own father, he kind of went through a self-fulfilling prophecy there and ended up wrecking the awesome relationship he kind of built up over the last few seasons. And then I think Jonathan's kind of very self-destructive and loathing in himself as well. After the whole Katrina event happened, he realised he was in over his head. I think he was kind of hating the fact that he'd gotten himself into this position and seemingly couldn't really get out of it. And, you know, him kind of being like, oh, should we go to Mexico then at the end of the season? Kind of self-destructive in that sense, because he's just not fixing his behaviour, not fixing himself. So it's just like the cycle going on there. And then obviously Rack and Amy are very self-destructive people as well, because they're getting into very dark magic and they're kind of getting addicted to it as well, and roping like Willow and other people into it. So they're very self-destructive people themselves and do self-destructive acts, as we've seen. And then another theme is the idea of like moving forward, moving on, kind of getting on with your life. So we had Buffy kind of returning from the dead, trying to move forward from that, trying to find her place in the world now, trying to find reasons to keep on going. Willow and Tara kind of finding their way back to each other after they broke up, and Willow kind of trying to move forward and moving on from her addiction to magic, and that's obviously going to be a thing that I imagine will continue next season as well. Spike getting his soul back is another example, I would say, because I think this is the only way they could move forward with his character, actually keep him on the show and actually want people to have him still be on the show after he tried to rape Buffy. He now has a soul, and that's really going to change things up, hopefully. And the only way I think he can move forward in a potential relationship with Buffy or anyone in Sunnydale would be to get his soul back, really feel what he's done, and hopefully try and redeem himself in that sense. Anya's vengeance on Xander after the whole events of Hell's Bells, she could move forward with that by putting all her sadness into vengeance instead, but then she couldn't really get her own back on Xander because she still loves him, so she had to move forward and move on and accept that kind of side of things as well. Giles leaving as his way of allowing Buffy to kind of move forward and move on and grow up with her life, and have a life for himself as well, away from Buffy when he thought she was dead, and kind of trying to find a new sense and a new purpose in his life back in England. And then Riley and Sam as well. Riley kind of moved on from Buffy, he's moving forward with his life, he's kind of found a really good existence now and a really good way of kind of getting by in his own life, and Sam's kind of helped him with that because he's moved on with her. And yeah, some really kind of, that's a more kind of optimistic, I guess, theme compared to some other ones this season, that's for sure. Then another one is life and death, and I've thrown in there a couple of other things like the hardships of life, the harsh realities of life, and also life after death. So kind of lots of things in that one really. But yeah, we kind of have Buffy and her struggle for finding a new life after she died, after her story was apparently over. She now had to find life again after death. Life is kind of like the big bad of the season. The demon kind of thing that came back with Buffy in Afterlife, I'm kind of dealing with that. That's kind of some life after death in that sense, and dealing with bringing someone back from the dead. Tara, her death, kind of losing that. The death of some relationships like Willow and Tara, like Xander and Anya, and the idea of Buffy not being able to feel anything. So is she still kind of dead even though she's living? Her relationship with Spike, we have someone who's alive being with someone who's dead. Spike's song in Much More Feeling, I died, that's kind of how it all starts. Katrina's death as well, her murder, how that affects things. What Buffy had to deal with, the hardships of life with her, getting a steady job that maybe she doesn't necessarily enjoy that much, money worries that she kind of had to deal with as well when she came back, the debt she was in, the prospect of Dawn being taken away from her if she's not like a good carer, if it's not a good home for Dawn. There's a lot of that kind of dealing with as well, and like the hardships of life and growing up and stuff like that. And yeah, Spike in once more with feeling as well, saying life's not a song. It's very much the kind of hardships of life as well. Life is just living, and sometimes it sucks. Then another theme is the idea of like finding inner strength, for better or worse, I would say as well. Buffy being able to find the strength to get up every day and move on, find a new purpose in life. She's found some inner strength in her there, crawling out of that grave at the end of the season. A much more fuller person than she was at the start of the season when she crawled out the grave. Dark Willow and Amy kind of finding some inner strength through like magic. And again, like I said, for better or worse, this is definitely more like a worse scenario, finding that inner strength and inner power within you, because Dark Willow kind of got addicted to that feeling of that power, feeling like no one could stop her. Jonathan defending himself against Andrew and Warren, eventually when he got a bit of a backbone after the whole Katrina situation, kept making jabs about it, stood up for himself, stood up against Andrew when Andrew threatened Xander and stuff. Again, they kind of went back on it a lot. But there was some inner strength that Jonathan found in himself there. Anya becoming a vengeance demon again, kind of finding some inner strength there because she's got some powers back, but again, not potentially being able to use them. She still found some in herself, and she found some uses for it, like tracking down Willow, like warning Warren, not Warren even, warning Jonathan and Andrew ahead of time that Willow was coming for them. Giles and his borrowed magics from the Wicker cult or whatever it was. He kind of got some inner strength from that he could use against Willow. And Buffy, when she was kind of torn, had like a psychic split almost, I guess, between her normal life and the Buffy who's just like this girl in like an asylum, almost an institution, who's kind of dreamt this whole kind of Slayer thing and this having a sister, blah blah blah. And Buffy kind of found the inner strength to power through that, realise what was real, kind of accept it, close the door on that kind of other alternative life, kind of battle through with that. Another theme, growing up, readjustment and navigating the world on your own, that kind of all groups together. Giles kind of leaving so Buffy can grow up, Dawn kind of growing up, finding herself as well, having potential relationship with someone like Justin, growing up in that sense, telling Buffy, I can't be saved from your life is dangerous, you have to just let me in and let me get involved in it. And then Buffy dealing with like bills and getting jobs and everything, and being a carer, she had to grow up, readjust to being alive again, navigating the world without Giles around, who she can just lean on and kind of give all the responsibility to. Xander and Anya, they kind of had to try and navigate a world where they could be married. Anya was like running the magic box now, so she had her own business, she was kind of navigating the world in that sense and growing up in that sense too. Xander was trying to grow up, I think, but again, he had some falters. And yeah, Buffy returning from the dead, as I mentioned, is readjustment. Riley kind of growing up, navigating his own place in the world. He kind of seemed to find it and moved on from Buffy. He's definitely a lot more mature than I think he was in season 4 and 5. Willow kind of trying to cut off magic in the middle part of the season, kind of going cold turkey on the whole magic thing, trying to readjust away from magic and away from a life where magic was involved with everything, navigating a world where she didn't use magic all the time to try and get Tara back. And Tabula Rasa, when everyone kind of lost their memories, they had to readjust to this new kind of existence, this new life, try and work out what was real, what was not, and navigate the world from like a new perspective where they didn't remember anything. And then finally, the last theme that I'm going to talk about, the idea of like consequences, and kind of dealing with them. Again, for better or worse, some consequences are good, some are bad. Buffy coming back from the dead, but that demon that kind of came with her that they dealt with in afterlife, some of the consequences of that, and the dark magics there that kind of really sent Willow down on this dark path. Probably got in her head, gave her a bit of an ego about what she was capable of. And the consequences, therefore, of Buffy being brought back from heaven, ripped out of heaven, that had a huge impact on her personally as well, and everyone else when they found out what they'd done. The consequences of Xander leaving Anya at the altar led to Anya becoming a vengeance demon again, a whole mess like her and Spike and everything. Xander really hurt from that, but I think it also gave him the strength to help Willow in the end. Spike getting his soul back, he might be able to feel the consequences of all his actions, and the fact that his attempt to rape a Buffy, kind of the consequences of that led him to try and seek down his soul in the first place. Willow kind of going down this dark path with Amy, getting addicted to magic use, exploring like dark magics, the consequences of that led to the catastrophic events at the end of the season. The trio and their interactions with Katrina, Warren, seemingly picking a random girl but it was actually his ex, and then that led to her death. They had to deal very briefly, and they kind of glossed over it, the consequences of that. Giles leaving, the fact that therefore, I think if he was around, Willow's magic wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as out of control as it did, because everyone was kind of dealing with their own problems, so they couldn't see what Willow was kind of going through as well. So that really escalated with him leaving, consequences of that, and he kind of, when he returned, he was like, I shouldn't have left. And Willow's kind of magic use, the consequences of that meant her and Tara broke up, and then Tara's death caused Dark Willow to rise up, and again the consequences of Buffy being brought back and kind of being beaten down by life throughout the whole season. Consequences of that kind of were explored in Normal again, where she had almost like a psychic split. She was torn between the real world and her in the hospital, kind of dreaming all of this, and then that led to her to try and like kill her friends, the consequences of that. So yeah, that's a few of the big themes I think season 6 had going for it. Again, a lot of them are very, very dark and morbid, but that's very in keeping with the season. It's not like puppies is a big theme in season 6, because I wish it were, but it's not. So yeah, that's just a few things I picked out, and again, not every single example I could think of, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, so that's some of the things I picked up on. And let me know what you kind of thought up as well, and what themes you see season 6 kind of like display, I guess. So yeah, that's that. And now we're going to talk about favourite episodes this season, and my oh my, is this an interesting one. Obviously we're going to talk about the ones that you guys voted for first, and thank you to everyone who kind of commented on that post and voted. I had like 250 votes, if not more, which is insane, and took me, I think, about an hour and a half to go through, which is why I do ask for only 3 episodes. And that is kind of the disclaimer going into this, is the fact that if you did list more than 3, sorry, I just didn't count you, because I did ask for 3, and it was like going to take ages to go through everything. And if not everyone, goes above, if there are some people who go above 3 and I count them, that means more episodes kind of get more votes, and it's not quite fair then, and it's not very balanced in terms of the voting. So I just kind of skipped over you guys. I allowed it if it was bargaining part 1 and 2. If you group them together as one, I did give you that, because you can technically see that as one episode. That was the only exception to that rule. But I don't think, until you actually count up all those votes when the time comes to do it, I don't think you realise how long it takes. I always forget how long it takes to do that, and it took about an hour and a half to kind of count. So yeah, that's why I only counted the ones where you did pick 3 episodes really. And yeah, I think this is really interesting, and I think the results here really do show how divided the fandom is on season 6, and how varied the opinions are of it, how down the middle it can get with people, how divisive and controversial it can be. Because 22 episodes make up season 6, of course, and there's only 1 episode that didn't get any votes at all. Only 1 out of all 22. That's very rare that happens. There's normally like 3 or 4 episodes that get no votes. Only 1. So that shows, like, say what you will about season 6, you know, I think you may not like every single part of season 6 or season 6 as a whole, but I think more so than any other season, there is at least like one episode that's pleasing to the majority, because there's only one that absolutely no one voted for, and that's like 250 people about who voted for this, which is kind of crazy. And that, because it's normally very, very similar kind of things. So 22 episodes has kind of been narrowed down to 17 kind of categories in here, which is a lot compared to a lot of other reviews, which I think is kind of fascinating. And the number one choice that you guys voted for, out of like 250 or so people voting, 204 people voted for this episode. So vast majority loving that one. So yeah, very interesting. And also, like, some of the rankings that you guys voted for were vastly different to mine. I was really surprised. We have a lot of significant differences between your guys' top ones and my top ones for sure. I think that I can see why season 6 is up for so much debate and why people constantly are talking about it and why it is so controversial. Because it's just so kind of equally split, like all these different episodes, getting people who really favour them. And yeah, one of my favourite episodes this season is very, very, very low down on the list from what you guys voted, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, thank you to everyone who voted. Very, very interesting. It says a lot, I think, about season 6, how diverse the taste is for it. The fact that only one episode, where normally you have 3 or 4 that get no votes, there's only one that didn't. So yeah, let's get into that, because in 17th, final place, was Flooded, which got no votes whatsoever, and it introduced a trio, just saying. I had to stop being salty about that, really. But yeah, Flooded was 17th, and then 16th place was All the Way and As You Were, which both got 1 vote. 15th was Gone, which got 3 votes. 14th was Wrecked and Hell's Bells, which got 4 votes. So I was quite surprised the Hell's Bells didn't do higher. So that seemed to be quite, people were really excited for that reaction. So I thought I'd actually do a lot better, but that is what it is. I think this is going to shock a lot of people as well. 13th place, Double Meat Palace, that got 5 votes. So that got more than all those ones, A lot of people, I think, would have put that near the bottom. So that actually did fairly well, all things considered. That has 1, 2, 3, 4. That's better than 6 episodes, according to what you guys voted for, which is kind of crazy. Then 12th place is Entropy, which got 6 votes. 11th was Afterlife and Older and Far Away. They both got 9 votes. 10th place, so top 10 now, Bargaining Part 1, which is got 11 votes. 9th was Life Serial and Smash, which both got 12 votes. 8th was Bargaining Part 2, which got 15 votes. And then this is where things really kind of start to jump, and you really see the gaps in the voting numbers. That's crazy. 7th place was Dead Things, which got 19 votes. This surprised me. 6th was Seeing Red, which only got 27 votes. So you compare that to like the top 5 votes now, there's a huge jump between the number of votes, from like 6 below to the top 5, like quite a big number. So yeah, I was surprised that Seeing Red didn't crack the top 5, but I can understand why you may not enjoy that episode given the ending. It's not exactly fun to watch, I suppose. So yeah, that's that. Then top 5 is actually joint 5th, was Villains and 2 to Go, which both got 43 votes, so a big jump there from the 27 for Seeing Red. And then 4th place, which did surprise me personally, was Normal Again, which got 48 votes. Normal Again did a lot better than I thought it was going to, because that was one of the ones for me that was yeah, it was okay. So again, that just shows how crazy different the opinions in season 6 can be, which I think this is why I kind of do these favourite episodes and include you guys in it, obviously because I want to get you guys involved, but I also just find it fascinating to compare it with mine. I just think that's really, really interesting. So yeah, Normal Again was 4th. Then 3rd place was Grave with 97 votes. 2nd place, Tabula Rasa, which had 127 votes, so a big jump there. Then obviously the biggest jump of all, and it's probably surprising absolutely no one. 1st place was Once More With Feeling, which had 204 votes. So crazy numbers there, considering, that's the vast majority of people who voted. Most of them also had Once More With Feeling in their top 3. So yeah, that's clearly quite an iconic, popular episode there. And that was the one thing that didn't really surprise me, was your guys' top 2 there. So yeah, that was what you guys voted for with your favourite episodes. And now we head into my top 5. Honourable mentions, probably Villains would be like a big honourable mention for me. I really enjoyed that one. And also Bargaining, part 1 and 2. I really liked those season openers. I thought they were great as well. But my top 5, I actually didn't have too much struggle to get my top 5 for this season. The order of them, like exactly like which is going to be 3rd, which is 4th, which is 5th, that I had a lot more of a struggle with. But I did kind of have my top 5 fairly simply, and my number 1 was kind of obvious as well. I don't think you're going to be shocked. You might be shocked by my top 5 though, or at least my 5th place, because 5th for me is As You Were, which, if we look at your guys' votes, was penultimate. The penultimate one, there's only one episode that performed worse, and As You Were only got 1 vote. And it's my 5th favourite episode this season. I loved having Riley back, I loved Sam, I loved the closure to that whole story. I thought that was really interesting, really fun. It ended up being kind of like a calm before the storm, I think, at the end of the season, really, because obviously after that was Hell's Bells, and everything after season 6 there was just like crazy. Yeah, I just really enjoyed them exploring the closure. I liked Buffy kind of ending things with Spike. Willow and Xander and Anya and everything had some really fun interactions with Sam. Of course, a lot of like comedic stuff. And I liked the confrontation between Spike and Riley. And yeah, as someone who quite liked Riley anyway, it was cool to see him again, have some closure there, and he was really great. So yeah, I absolutely adored that episode. I remember being like, what's the general consensus on this episode? Because I absolutely adored it, and I still do. And yeah, that's in my top 5, and did not perform as well by quite a long way for you guys, which I think is very interesting. Then number 4 is Dead Things, because I did kind of want an episode that was quite heavily focused on the trio in my top 5, and this was kind of the only one that I think ever had a chance. I loved how things escalated with Katrina, and it was just the potential more than anything, because they never lived up, I think, for me anyway, the trio with Dead Things. They never really lived up to how great and well used they were in this episode, because like, well, after this everything's going to be changed, they're going to behave quite differently, but they ended up for me being quite the same, so it's like meh. But this episode, holy shit, really escalated things. Katrina's death was kind of crazy, then Buffy kind of getting framed for it, trying to hand herself in. Then Dawn's reaction when Buffy was like telling her that I'm going to hand myself into the police. She's like, you just want to leave, you know, you don't want to be here. So there's some really kind of emotional moments in there, and yeah, it was just, for me, it was like a eureka moment for the trio. I was like, yes, they're really working for me. And regardless of that, they stopped working again after this episode for me, for the most part. They were really, really great in this episode, so it's kind of firing on all cylinders. This was the holy shit shit hits the fan moment of the season. And yeah, things got really crazy, things got really real and dark, and I thought the performances in that episode were really great as well from everyone, you know, especially Sarah Michelle Gellar, Michelle, and the guys who played all the members of the trio. I thought they were great in that episode, so that was another really great, intense episode. Then 3rd place, Tabula Rasa, just such a fun episode, and I really appreciate the fun episodes in season 6 all the more, considering how kind of dark and dismal and bleak it was for most of the season. I loved the idea of them all forgetting who they were and trying to piece things together. The focusing on Willow's spell going wrong, that's always kind of a fun time, and that was kind of adding into her addiction storyline that I was very interested in anyway. And yeah, really, really funny moments. Willow's kind of throwback to I Think I'm Kind of Gay line was great. Obviously, it also ended on a very kind of sad, somber note with Tara leaving Willow. I've been listening to Goodbye to You quite a lot since I watched that episode. Great song. And we had the ending as well with Buffy and Spike kissing again, and then dealing with the aftermath once more with feeling. So there's kind of a big highlight for Willow's character there. There's a lot of fun of them all kind of forgetting, piecing things out. Giles and Spike as a duo were really funny, and you know, it did move the plot forward as well as being really, really fun, because it kind of saw the end of Tara and Willow temporarily, until they got back together for like 2 minutes, so yay. yeah, just a really, really fun episode. Obviously you guys really loved it too. It was number 2 for you guys. And a really kind of bright, happy moment, I think, in season 6. And, you know, the Giles and Anya stuff as well, quite funny. So a nice light-hearted episode to really break up what was a very kind of sad and bleak season, really. So looking back, I appreciate it all the more. So just being an absolute hoot. It was really, really fun. Okay, so my top 2, and at number 2, it's 2 to go. 2 to go. At 2, it's 2 to go. Wow, I'm loopy. It's 1 AM. Anyway, I had to go for a Dark Willow episode. Of course I did, because she was an icon, and I have no choice but to stan. But yeah, obviously things really escalated here, because Warren had just been killed. Willow kind of hunting down the other 2 members of the trio, using all her powers. Some really, really cool sequences in this episode. And yeah, kind of crazy to kind of see Willow like this and hunting them down, you know, on the truck and everything. That whole sequence playing out, her tearing the bricks away from the police precinct thing, and then the fight with Buffy, the amazing, amazing ending with Giles showing up. How iconic was that? One of the best endings, I think, to any episode ever. So good. And the fight between Willow and Buffy, it was just a huge kind of escalation of things, and it was one of those, how the hell are we getting out of these moments? Because I was like, are they going to have to kill her to stop her? Because I don't want that to happen, because I lose my shit and be heartbroken beyond repair. And I was, you know, it's one of those, how on earth do they get out of this kind of thing? So I was very invested in that. And yeah, just seeing all these different elements come together and see Willow in such a, quite literally, in the dark place. It was, you know, kind of heartbreaking to watch, because obviously it came from some really sad events and a whole season's worth of pain kind of building up to this. But at the same time, it was just, Dark Willow was so much fun to watch, such a fun kind of villain for them to face. And I really enjoyed that kind of end of days kind of feel they had going for it. You know, it felt very apocalyptic, but at the same time, it was a very personal matter, because this was Willow they were dealing with. You know, this was their friend. Really, really great, kind of raising the tension, raising the stakes as they kind of headed into the finale. And then, yeah, the ending with Giles was just everything. So, adored that episode. And then, yeah, number 1. Are we surprised? Probably not. I imagine all of you guessed it. My number 1 episode for season 6 is Once More with Feeling. Of course it is. Just such a cool idea of taking like a musical episode, actually making it make sense within the logic of the universe with like this demon. All the songs are great. I listen to the soundtrack so much now. Really, really good stuff. And it's such a brilliant idea of kind of exploring depression through what's normally such an uplifting kind of medium, with the musical and everyone's singing and being happy and dancing and everything, but there's actually some really somber and dark messages behind the songs, like Something to Sing About, Dawn's Lament, I'll Never Tell, still kind of foreshadowing, I think, we're going to go with those two. Under Your Spell, and then the reprise of that with Standing, which is still my favourite song, I would say. The Tara and Giles duet was so good. Walk Through the Fire is great. So much to enjoy. There's some really funny songs as well. Anya obviously singing about bunnies is great. But some really sad, really kind of emotional pieces of music in there as well. And the whole cast just really commit to the idea. Obviously it seems to be like the OG definitive musical episode, and I don't think any show seems to have topped it with their own ones. And from what I've seen, I definitely agree with that. And the fact that I find most musicals, maybe not most, I find a lot of musicals quite boring. They really have to have like a decent story, and sometimes I can just never get past the fact that they just burst into song. I feel like they really went with it in Once More with Feeling, and it really felt earned, and it didn't just feel like a gimmick for the sake of it. It felt like a really smart way of having like Buffy attempt suicide basically and sing about depression and have all of her friends find out this horrible, horrible thing that she was in heaven and she got pulled out of there, which would have made really dramatic stuff anyway, but maybe that could have been really, really difficult to watch, like so much of season 6 already was. So the fact that then they then had them sing it, so on a surface level it didn't feel quite as like, oh man, but it really, really was when you really think about it. You know, that moment where Buffy's voice just breaks and she's like, there was no pain, blah, 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 and the look on everyone's face when they realise what's happened. Just so, so good. A genius idea. Loved every minute of it from start to finish. The anticipation that people had going into that reaction was so much fun as well. I had a really nice response for the most part to it. And yeah, I think it's nearly my most viewed video, I think. The body is still ahead, but it's very, very close. It's literally only like 100 or so views, I think, in it. And the body, as that reaction, is still my most viewed video. But I had such a great response to this. You know, people are really excited, I think, for you to get there. So glad I wasn't spoiled on the fact that it was a musical as well. I mean, it still would have been fantastic. It almost certainly still would have been my favourite, even if I had known. But just the shock factor when Buffy starts singing, the setup and everything. Just such a well-produced episode of television. So good. Brilliant songs. Really powerful message behind it. It wasn't just like a filler musical episode. It was very important to the plot. You know, some huge revelations come to light. Everyone finds out what happened with Buffy. Tara finds out that Willow put a spell on her. Giles makes the decision to really commit to leaving. And there's a lot of kind of threads kind of really expanded upon in that episode that ties into the rest of the season. And, you know, a very iconic moment at the end as well, I suppose, with Buffy and Spike kissing. So lots to love about that episode. I really, really loved how they changed things up. Very inventive, very clever. But there's a lot of heart and meaning to it as well. Just a stunning, stunning episode from start to finish. I absolutely adored it. Easily my favourite episode of season 6. Great stuff there. So that's my top 5. A few sort of surprises in there, I suppose. You know, I agreed with you in most part. I think obviously the biggest change was the fact that I had As You Were in my top 5. And, you know, I only had 1 vote from you guys. So that's kind of crazy. But it just shows how diverse everyone's tastes is, I guess, when it comes to this season, which I actually think is very, you know, very, very fascinating. So yeah, that's my top 5 episodes. And finally, as we end this 70-hour review, we're going to talk about some predictions for season 7. I think I have 6. And yeah, this is my last ever Buffy prediction thing, because obviously I can't really predict next season when next season's the last one for that review. So this will be my last prediction section for Buffy. Obviously we'll still have some for Angel, but yeah, I can't see myself doing predictions and stuff for, and big reviews for like the comics when I get to those. So yeah, this is going to be the last one for Buffy, guys. Been quite a journey. And yeah. Anyway, before we get too emotional, you know, we still have 22 episodes of Buffy to get through before we start getting sad that it's over. But yeah, the first of many lasts, I suppose, going into the final season of Buffy. And yeah, my first prediction, just because I'm never going to have another chance to predict this, Willow will continue to be a cinnamon roll. And I think, you know, I also think they'll continue to focus on like her recovery and stuff, which is very cinnamon rolly. Because while she wasn't always a cinnamon roll this season, there still were moments, so it's not like a complete no. And I wanted to continue those predictions because she'll always be my cinnamon roll to me. Probably, unless she does something really, really horrible next season, we'll see. But yeah, it's probably going to be a given, knowing my love of Willow, considering that she went evil in this season, and I'm still like, marry me. So yeah, that's just kind of a throw-in prediction because it's a given, it has to be in there. Then another prediction is that I think Spike may be going through a redemption arc next season. The fact that he has a soul, I imagine, is maybe an indicator of that. Unless they really kind of go against the norm and the expected for that story. I think he's really going to start to feel the effects of everything he's done, like Angel did when he first got his soul. Really realise what he nearly did to Buffy, and I think this is going to be maybe a big deal for him to really try and change his ways and become someone maybe quite removed from the Spike we normally know, try and redeem himself in everyone's eyes. So I think that could be a big part of Spike's character arc next season. I think he's really going to fight for redemption, maybe become a hero or something. I don't know. I feel like that could be where Spike's arc's going. I could obviously be completely wrong, but we'll see. So I predict some Spike redemption arc going on next season. And another prediction is that at least one more main character will die next season. And the only reason I'm saying that, I don't want it to happen, but the only reason I'm saying it is because it's the final season. And it's a Whedon show. And it's the final season of a TV show. They normally do kill off a big character in the final season of any show, for the most part. Certainly in like shows like Buffy. So I'm anticipating myself for heartbreak again. As to who, I don't know. I really couldn't guess. I don't know. I feel like maybe one of the like original three. Oh, hello phone. My phone didn't agree with that prediction. Maybe even like Giles or something. I don't know. I feel like we're going to lose like at least one big character next season, because it's the final season. But yeah, I don't want to like tempt fate and like say who it may be or may not be. Who knows? Maybe that could tie into Spike's redemption arc actually, and maybe Spike like sacrifices himself. No, I don't know if I'd want that. I suppose it depends what they do with Spike's arc, whether or not I want to see him die, you know? Or if not, maybe like, yeah, one of the core original characters from season 1, maybe be kind of maybe a nice fitting end, that's the end of the show or whatever. And we'll see. Because obviously, if people survive season 7, maybe everyone dies, and the comics are just all prequels, and I've been completely duped. Who knows? But yeah, that's kind of a big thing I'm expecting, to lose someone big in the final season. And kind of the opposite to that, I suppose, I think that we're going to see lots of old characters return, because it's the final season, maybe like one last swan song. And I've also added to that maybe like a big Angel crossover episode. I'd love to see, because we didn't see Angel in this season of Buffy, which I think is the first. I'd love to see like all the Angel characters being an episode of Buffy, or all the Buffy characters being an episode of Angel. But I would prefer it probably the other way around. I would prefer to see Angel characters in Buffy, because I'd love to see Angel, Wesley and Cordelia in particular all come to Buffy for its final season, like even just like a quick cameo or something, like a last hurrah. That'd be really cool to see them. But I think like we're going to see, or at least like get references to loads of characters from years gone by for the final season of the show. But I suppose that is if they know going into that it's their final season. I don't know if that's the case. I think they were, by the end of the show, they did know it was ending, so I think they have written it as like a series finale. But I don't know if like when they went into the season they knew it was going to be the last one or not. I don't know if it got like cancelled near the end, or they just ended on their own terms. I'm not quite sure if that works. So maybe they're not going to like bring those other people back, like a swan song, last hurrah kind of thing. Maybe because it just doesn't fit with the story they want to tell, or maybe they just didn't know at the time it was going to be the final season. But I'd like to think, I suppose, that we're going to see lots of old and familiar faces from seasons gone by. Time for the She-Mantis to return, I say. There you go. And then you went a whole review without mentioning She-Mantis. Can you believe it? But I didn't let you down. I would never let you down. So yeah, that's another prediction. Then I also think Dawn's going to go through her own kind of training journey in season 7, maybe become like an honorary Slayer. I always have trouble with that word. And I think a lot of that spawns from the season 6 finale, where she could really hold her own in a fight and be like, yeah, I've been paying attention to you, you know? And the whole point of their kind of conversation between Dawn and Buffy was like, you need to let me in, you know, there's no escaping your life. Just kind of accept that, let me be part of it. And maybe she can go for like self-defense classes and become like a real badass fighter of her own. I think that could be really cool, maybe. So yeah, I think Dawn's could have a big part next season, like going through her own like training regime, trying to follow in Buffy's footsteps in that sense. Obviously not, she can't like become a Slayer, unless, you know, something happens to Faith. I hope we see Faith. Oh, please. But I think that'd be a bit weird if Dawn was like I don't think that would really work with it, because she was like the key and stuff. It'd be a bit weird. She was suddenly like a Slayer, but I think she's going to go through like her own journey to badassery, and like she's going to be like training and stuff on like the regular, I would say. And you know, Buffy could be like her watcher, which would be an interesting role for her to take on. So yeah, that's another prediction. And then finally, this was just a weird one I wanted to throw in there, because it started to happen to me a lot lately, and it may or may not happen. We'll have to wait and see. But I was thinking, maybe I won't be satisfied with the ending of the show. I just thought maybe I'll throw that out there, because it tends to be a thing with me in the past few years. Shows I've really got invested in, the endings come about and I'm like, oh, okay. I hope that's not the case, because I really want to be in love with how they wrap things up and everything. And you know, I just hope it's not too like open-ended, or you know, everyone I love dies. It's like, oh, that's really sad and depressing. I hope I'm really satisfied with the ending, but maybe I won't be. So I've kind of thrown that out into the universe, because I'm often very wrong with my predictions. So I've kind of put that in the hope that I'm really going to enjoy how they wrap things up, because I'm really fascinated to see exactly what they're going to do with season 7. I have no idea plot-wise what they're going to do. No idea what that's going to be about, who they're going to focus on, you know, big bad, whatever that's going to be. And yeah, you know, do they know going into it's going to be the final season, so you can like start really wrapping stuff up right from the off? I don't know, but I'm very, very apprehensive, because I really hope I like it after, you know, over 2 years of reacting to the show. We're coming into the final season. I just really hope they get out on a high. And I've seen a lot of love for season 7, so I'm kind of excited to get to it, and hopefully it's not as dark and sombre as season 6 was, because obviously it's not as fun to talk about, I think, when it's as, you know, bleak as season 6 was. But overall, season 6 was still a fantastic season. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, that's going to be my review. I'm excited for season 7, very nervous as well, very sad. It's going to be the last one. It's been a hell of a journey with you guys, and I really hope I enjoy this final season, and I hope you're looking forward to seeing my reactions to it. And I hope you enjoyed me yapping on about season 6, my ups and downs with it, things I liked, things I didn't. You know, what are your favourite episodes? What themes did you pick out? Who are your favourite characters this season? What's your favourite character arc? Stuff like that. Let me know. And yeah, again, you by all means do not have to agree with me. You probably don't. So I know I have some very unpopular opinions, it would seem, coming to season 6, but that is life, and that is that. And overall, season 6, really, really liked this season. They really pushed the boundaries, I think, really tested your love of these characters, and for the most part, I think it really paid off, even if the trio as a whole fell flat for me. And even then, that didn't really take away my enjoyment of the season, which I think in a lot of other shows it would, so that's testament, I think, to how great Buffy is. And yeah, that is that. Very excited for the final season. Obviously it's very bittersweet, knowing it's going to be it after that. But over 2 years, I think we've kind of earned this final season, and we've earned actually getting to the end of this journey after so long. And so many times I've just wanted to binge through the whole show and had to refrain. So yeah, it's going to be an emotional kind of final season, I would say, regardless of content, because it's just going to be the end. And it's been a big part of my channel. Things have really grown and changed from there. And you guys have been wonderful. So thank you so much for all your support and the reactions to this season. Hope you're excited for the final season of reactions for Buffy. I certainly am. And yeah, I've had more than enough of your time yapping about season 6. So we'll end it there. Really great season. I really did enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing what they're going to be doing with the final season of Buffy. So yeah, that'll be coming very soon. Because we technically still have another slot in the reaction cycle for these, and that will be Buffy. So I'll be seeing you very, very soon for season 7, episode 1. Crazy times. And yeah, thank you so much as always for your support. You guys are wonderful. And yeah, until season 7, thanks for watching.